Well, look at you guys. J'espère que vous allez bien, les amis. Bienvenue à un nouvel épisode de Drette sur le tape. Je l'ai mentionné peut-être précédemment, mais je me souviens plus si j'en ai reparlé. Mais je fais des capsules avec Hockey Québec, desquelles je suis excessivement fier et qui sont sur mes réseaux sociaux. Et je vous en parle pas parce qu'ils me le demandent ou parce qu'ils me payent pour ça, vraiment parce que c'est comme des sketchs, dans le fond, qu'on a fait, Charles Bellerin et moi. Et celui du DVD du parent cinglé est peut-être mon préféré, qui est sorti le dernier sur mes réseaux sociaux. Donc, allez voir ça, il en reste juste un la semaine prochaine, une capsule. Et c'est un hommage à Yvan Ponton. Hommage, c'est peut-être pas le bon terme, peut-être psychose dérivée serait peut-être le meilleur terme. Anywho, check it out, si vous voulez esquisser peut-être ne serait-ce qu'un petit sourire là, dans un transport en commun bien proche de chez vous. Je suis vraiment content de vous présenter l'épisode d'aujourd'hui. Craig Buntin, je sais que une des missions, en tout cas, que je me donne à travers le tape, est de vous faire découvrir des gens que vous ne connaîtriez peut-être pas autrement. Et surtout des parcours fascinants. Craig, c'est comme drôle, on va en parler là, dans l'épisode, mais c'est par mon père que j'ai été bien en contact avec Craig. C'est lui qui a créé SportLogik. Je pensais que c'était SportLogik et pendant un bout de l'émission, je dis SportLogik. Après, comme je réalise que il n'y a pas de S, c'est singulier. SportLogik, qui est un logiciel d'intelligence artificielle, si je me trompe pas. En tout cas, bref, je sais pas c'est quoi le terme exact, mais un logiciel, qui est utilisé par, en fait, pratiquement toutes les équipes de la Ligue nationale pour les statistiques avancées. Donc, quand vous regardez une game et qu'on dit, le goals expected et toutes ces choses-là, c'est tous des trucs qui ont été créés puis qui ont été en fait mainstreamisés, en tout cas amenés dans le mainstream, popularisés, voilà, par SportLogik et qui a vraiment changé. Puis je parle du hockey dans ce cas-ci, mais c'est vraiment présent dans tous les sports là, maintenant pratiquement majeurs. Et plus encore, Craig est un ancien Olympien. C'est un patineur artistique de haut niveau qui a été champion canadien à plusieurs reprises. Et qui a eu qui nous parle de son histoire. C'est un gars de l'Ouest du Canada qui a déménagé à Montréal et il a vécu aussi une période assez difficile après qu'il a arrêté de patiner. On en parle souvent, mais la période post-sport pour les athlètes peut être extrêmement chaotique au niveau chaotique, pas au sens nécessairement que ça revole de tous les bords, mais il y a une quête identitaire qui doit être il y a une mise à niveau qui doit être faite par rapport à où est-ce qu'ils sont rendus dans leur vie, et ça n'a pas été facile, et Craig en parle ouvertement et c'est excessivement fascinant. Il a été très généreux dans ses propos, très généreux de son temps, et on a fait plus que 2 heures. C'est rare qu'on fait plus que 2 heures avec un invité, mais voilà. Craig, étant un gars de l'Ouest canadien, habite à Montréal depuis un certain temps, il a déménagé pour le patinage artistique, parle quand même français, mais se sentait pas à l'aise au point de faire l'épisode en français. Donc l'épisode se déroule, comme diraient certains, en langue anglaise. Donc voilà, c'est un des rares, des occasionnels épisode de Drette sur le tape en anglais. Je sais pas si le dernier c'était Brian Burke qu'on avait fait. En tout cas, il y en a pas énormément. Mais voilà quoi, je crois que ça valait le coup. Vous pardonnerez bien sûr mon anglais excessivement rouillé et parfois cabotin. C'est weird de parler anglais parce que c'est comme si t'as des bonnes et des mauvaises journées. Et là, j'en parle pas comme, je sais que ça a l'air que j'en parle comme si quelqu'un avait le cancer, mais je veux dire, c'est juste comme, quand c'est pas une langue que tu pratiques de manière constante et depuis un certain temps, et c'est it's a coin flip, baby. You never know what you're gonna get. Donc voilà, vous pardonnerez mes ups and downs. Mais voilà, Craig Buntin en vaut en tout cas certainement la peine, parce que oui, c'est pour lui qu'on l'écoute, pas pour moi. Juste avant de vous présenter Craig, juste vous rappeler qu'on on n'est plus très loin de Noël, les amis. Et je sais qu'il y en a parmi vous qui sont des gens de dernière minute et qui se disent flûte, j'ai pas de cadeau pour personne. Ça tombe bien, je sors un show. Je suis en rodage avec mon spectacle, donc si jamais vous voulez glisser une paire de billets, écoutez, libre à vous de le faire. Hein. Je pense il y a plein de dates là, qui sont rachetées. Drummond, Saint-Jean, Sherbrooke. Tu vois, au moment d'enregistrer ceci, là, je m'en vais à Québec et Alma. Donc, ça va être passé quand je sors, mais je vais repasser probablement hiver, printemps. Donc, allez tout voir ça au davidbeaucage.com, voir où je passe, qui fait votre affaire, les billets, bedding, bedang. Mais oui, c'est ça. Alors, voilà. Sinon, j'en profite aussi parce que là, on approche de l'épisode spécial World Juniors avec Chucky Pallarino. Et en espérant Stéphane Leroux, bien sûr, je ne l'ai pas encore contacté, mais à voir si on garde cette bonne tradition en vie. Et voilà, excusez, j'ai le nez qui coule. Je vous rappelle que pour poser des questions aux boys, ça se passe sur notre Patreon. Patreon, le cœur, l'artère principale de Drette sur le tape. Sans Patreon, nous ne sommes rien, nous ne sommes pas ici. Je ne suis pas en train de vous parler. Ce sont les joueurs de l'équipe de Drette sur le tape, les membres Patreon. Ça bloque des tirs, ça score top net, ça fait tout. Ces petites personnes-là, c'est incroyable. Et donc, ça se passe sur le Patreon si vous voulez que votre question se rende à Chucky. Mais le Patreon, c'est plus que ça. Il y a également, et puis ça, je suis très fier de vous en parler, mais on est en train de mijoter en ce moment avec nos membres Patreon la 200e. On est en train, parce qu'on se rapproche tranquillement du 200e épisode de Drette sur le tape. On va faire quelque chose de spécial pour les fans de Drette sur le tape. Donc, on est en train carrément de le concevoir en collaboration avec les Patreons. Qui ça vous tente de recevoir? Qui ça vous tente qu'on voit? On va faire quelque chose de... comment dire? Le mot, c'est spécial. Comme dirait Marc Bergevin en parlant de Gallagher. C'est un gars spécial, Gally. C'est pas Gally, spécial. Les larmes aux yeux avant de donner un contrat qui, évidemment, sera un boulet pour quelques années encore. Patreon également aussi, ben là, Noël approche. On fait des tirages sporadiques. Et on essaie de le faire à chaque mois, là, plus ou moins. Mais écoutez, novembre achève, il va y avoir un petit tirage d'automne et encore après ça, un petit tirage de Noël, bien sûr, pour remercier tous ces adorables membres Patreon de tenir Drette sur le tape à bout de bras. Alors, c'est ce qui complète les messages d'avant-match. Nous sommes maintenant rendus à l'épisode d'aujourd'hui. Je vous rappelle, c'est en anglais et j'ai hâte d'avoir votre feedback sur cet épisode-là. Très le fun, là, depuis le début de la saison, vous donnez du feedback aux épisodes. Depuis Louis-José, j'ai eu du gros feedback sur Claude Villegrain aussi sur le Patreon, là, justement, parce qu'il n'est pas encore sorti public au moment où j'enregistre ceci. Toujours le fun d'avoir vos impressions sur les épisodes et n'hésitez pas à m'écrire, ça me fait plaisir de vous lire. Beaucoup de belles suggestions d'invités futurs aussi, des fois ça vous allume sur des invités, n'hésitez pas à m'écrire. Évidemment, ça fait longtemps que j'ai mentionné ce commentaire-là, mais j'ai écouté des podcasts récemment, je suis comme, oui, c'est vrai, j'oublie toujours de dire ça. Si vous aimez le podcast, ou en fait, peu importe ce que vous pensez de ce podcast, en fait, j'imagine, non, si vous aimez pas ça, allez vous, je corrige. Non, mais c'est les ratings sur les plateformes, que ce soit Spotify, Apple Podcast, peu importe où vous écoutez votre podcast, vous aimez ça, lâchez un petit nombre d'étoiles agréable et représentatif de votre appréciation du podcast. Et ça aide, en fait, pour la visibilité du podcast. Mais j'ai oublié, je le disais beaucoup dans les premières saisons, mais je fais, ah oui, c'est vrai, c'est toujours apprécié, puis ça fait toujours une belle différence. Donc, voilà. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est ce qui complète l'avant-match Drette sur le tape de cet épisode. Et je vous souhaite un très beau moment avec Monsieur Craig Buntin.
Drette sur le tape avec David Beaucage.
Yeah, I've never listened to an audiobook now that you mention it. Like,
I was going to ask for the Beatles book if there is one.
Oh, there probably is, but we're talking like, yeah, it's got to be like, because we were talking before
it'll be a 20-hour party.
Oh, for sure.
Though.
We were talking about the Mark Lewis and Tunin Beatles book.
Are we recording now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
All right.
There's no like beginning to this. There's no end.
Okay, and we're on.
But yeah, nothing was disclaimed or anything. Like we just like so. Yeah, that's kind of funny. We met through my dad actually. Like, so how did you meet my dad? Actually, I don't even.
So
know.
It was it's funny. So he had contacted I think a bunch of people within the Montreal ecosystem for startups and technology. I think he's giving some kind of a report to somebody at the government level. I'm not sure.
That's what
he was sort of looking for some input as to how the province can do better at offering value-added services to new startups who are trying to get new technologies off the ground. So he had sort of reached out to me. It was a cold email, and he and I just hit it off. Like, I think I might be buddies with your dad.
I like that. I like the idea of that. Yeah. He was super enthusiastic. He's like, you have to meet this guy. He did SportLogik, and I, of course, as a hockey fan, we've heard the word SportLogik for years now, and knowing that you're a part of this is like super interesting, because I think a few years from like back my producer, who's a friend, who's a guy from Princeton who played hockey. He's like, yeah, have you heard of this SportLogik thing? And we kind of looked into it, and then it was on the list, but like we never got around to it. And then you just kind of came back naturally around.
Man, it never gets old when you hear somebody say that, because it's like, for me, when I think SportLogik, I think this scrappy little thing that a few of us were doing, just hoping that it would survive, you know. And so
look at you
so
now.
we, when I hear even just the name SportLogik, like that came out of like necessity. We were working, we did a pitch to some investor, and they asked, and we had a skating specific name, and they kind of said, is skating big enough? Do you want to think, what is the brand okay? And literally went home, like quickly came up with a name and a new logo, and came back for the next pitch probably like that afternoon. And it's just like, so when something like that comes about, and then years later you hear people talking about it, people that you don't know talking about it, it's really interesting. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's like hearing someone say your band's name.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, you were part of that band. He's like, yeah, that's my band, man.
Exactly.
You just came up with the name like one hangover morning or whatever. Like, now it's your kind of identity, professional identity in a way. So SportLogik has been bought by how many NHL teams at this point?
Almost all. Yeah,
so
I think at
32?
this point we are all but one.
Really?
And even that one, I think we had some products with them.
Who's holding out?
I can't say.
Oh, okay.
I know we don't.
I thought it was public. Sorry.
It might even be at this point. I'm not sure, but I just
31 out of 32 NHL teams are using SportLogik at this time.
Again, for me, it sounds a bit surreal to say it. I think very early on came up with the right information, the right insights delivered the right way at the right time. And part of it was getting the hockey community to sort of understand what we were doing and understand what all these numbers would be. Mm-hmm. And part of it was trying to figure out how to get the numbers to speak the language of hockey.
So for people who don't know about SportLogik and who are not necessarily like hockey fans or whatever, what is SportLogik? What does it do?
Yeah, so great question. So we're a technology company. We have a lot of artificial intelligence, 7 patented technologies. We take in video of games and we collect data from that video. We use computer vision, artificial intelligence to track basically the pixels on the screen to come up with very deep data. We also have people who are cleaning and tagging and curating that information. We take all that data. Basically, we build out a 4,000 line play-by-play. So think of, in a 3,600 second game, it's more than once per second we're identifying an event. So a loose puck recovery, a pass, a block, turnover, line carry, right? So take 4,000 lines and then add descriptions to each one of those events as well, right? So if it was a breakaway, was it a 3-on-2 or what was the manpower situation? And so you have this group of descriptors as well. So we take that really deep data set, and then we have an interface that the teams can log into, so sort of like a web app. And they basically are able to get pregame, postgame reports, player comparison tools, insights on how they're playing effectively, where some of their gaps are, where some of their opponents' gaps are, and where their opponents are playing effectively, drafting, scouting tools. So sort of think of all the tools that you would need to make great decisions within an organization. For us, we're providing the data and those tools under all of that.
So you just so AI is collecting all that data, and because I saw this thing you posted on Twitter or X now, as they say, the one where this I think they're like play-by-play and the color guy you can through the voice, I don't know the guy, but you can see he's like, I don't know, in his 60s, 70s, he's like, oh boy, who's collecting all that data? And the other guy's going, oh, it's SportLogik, it's AI, and the guy's like, what? He's like, oh, it's computer science, like we're in 2022. He's like, and he just says, "Oh boy,
oh boy." It was my favorite clip of all the media we've had in like 9 years. Oh boy, that was my favorite.
Just a way of saying this is so beyond me. Can't even fathom.
And you could hear the sort of confusion / maybe like interest, maybe just like kind of overwhelmed. There's something about the tone of that. Oh boy, that was just bang on.
Like I could not explain any of this to anyone.
Yeah,
but it does sound interesting. So that's how when we were watching a game and there's all that information like goals expected and goals, and you're like goals expected and 13.9. How was that? Even like came about, and this is all through AI that you guys are doing that, you know?
It is. So look, think of an expected goal. And I always say that we can't underestimate how smart coaches are. Look, even the worst coaches in the league, they're so good at what they do. They process so much information intuitively, right? And they may not need numbers, but they know what's happening for the most part, right? When you look at like an expected goal, think of like the sequence of events that leads up to a specific type of shot. Mm-hmm. So it could be, maybe you're a dump and chase team. You take the puck and then you make the shot. If you're making that shot successfully X number of times, then that we'll sort of compare the quality of that type of play versus every other type of play you could have made, or every other sequence of plays that you could have made leading up to it. And the expected goal is essentially, you can kind of think of it as like how the quality of the shot, right? How high quality, how likely is it that sequence and that location of the shot how likely was it to result in a goal?
Right.
So when you see a difference, let's say you've got an expected goal of 5, right? Let's just say.
Yeah.
And it ends up, you ended up scoring 3 goals in the game. Well, that means the quality of those shots was really good, but what was generally missing was either the goalie was really strong that night, or maybe the shot from the time it left the stick to the time it hit the net was not accurate, right? So you might not have been on net.
Right.
So you can think there's some issue between the shot and the goalie, but the actual quality of the shot, if you can just continue to bank high expected goal shots, right, you're likely to consistently get higher goals. So
that's the kind of details you can really get into with SportLogik, and that's really interesting. How has it changed the way? I guess you're on the other side of I should be asking, I guess, coaches, but you probably know also by now, like, how has it changed the way, like, how teams do they use SportLogik? Like, what has it changed in, like, hockey coaching, or do the players use it, the management? What has it changed in the business?
So, look, I'm going to put a caveat on everything I'm about to say. I'm actually the wrong guy to ask that question. The irony behind this is that I was a figure skater and I know very little about hockey. I knew very little about hockey when we started the company, and I know very little about hockey today.
Right.
What I do know is a lot about the context, the nuance, and the detail of the data. And that is for me where
that's a part of the answer for sure.
Yeah. So the best way that I can personally answer it, and I'm sure you should bring somebody from our team on. You would probably have the most fascinating conversations, but the best way that I can answer it is that the pushback that we had when we first started the company, the common response that we got when we were demoing the product and showing that was like, that's a lot of data. Have a nice day. We just could not get our first team on board. The analytics industry looked like a whole bunch of people who were, crunching numbers and coming up with interesting looking visuals, but the analytics community was sort of disconnected from the teams for the most part, with maybe a couple of exceptions. So when I look at that versus now, almost every team has a decent, if not strong, analytics department. And I find where the skill level has just significantly increased is the ability for the guys in these analytics departments to communicate the game of hockey to the coaches, to the operations managers, to whoever the trainers or whoever they're working, the scouts, right? And it's that level of communication, that sort of translation between the data and hockey that I find has just increased exponentially. It definitely has changed, and I'm convinced that the game has actually changed partially because of smarter decisions being made in the types of plays that the teams are making.
Yeah.
But again, that's where I'm probably beyond my. Oh, that's higher than my pay grade.
No, that's all right, because that's kind of we started with the end of the movie. When a movie starts with the end and then you go back.
We're going to Tarantino this thing.
We're absolutely back and forth. This is going to be the Pulp Fiction of the podcast. No, but because I've just seen recently the movie Past Lives. I don't know if you've heard about this. This Canadian-Korean girl did a movie called Past Lives about all those eras in our lives. Like you're 12 and you have someone super important in your life, and then you lose touch, and then 12 years later you reconnect, and then 12 years later again, and then we have all those lives within our lives, and you're a very good example of that, because if we go back, you're based in Montreal and you've been for a few years now, but you're actually from
Kelowna.
Yeah. Well, even before that,
Vancouver before that.
Yeah. So you went to the Olympics as a figure skater. So we're going to go back to that because that's very interesting. We've had many Olympians on the podcast, but first figure skater for sure. You started out in Vancouver. How old were you when you started figure skating?
So I started late. I was 10 in Kelowna.
Is that
actually.
like a late?
Yeah. So to put that in context, the first time I got on the ice for can skate lessons, I was on the ice with probably sort of 6-7-year-olds. Most of the junior trainers were my age.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was, I mean, one of my first days on the ice skating backwards, when you skate backwards for the first time, you lean forward and you kind of try to shuffle your feet backwards. Yeah. And I remember knocking my butt, hit this kid in the face, and the kid fell over. So the height difference was about that.
Oh, that's very funny. Because it's true, people like by 4 or 5 years old at that age, everyone's on skates by then. How did you get to figure skating? Like most Canadian boys are told, hey, you're going to play hockey, you're going to play. How did you get about that?
So I got to rewind a little. So my mom raised my brother and I in Surrey, British Columbia, so just Surrey. Outside Vancouver.
I think Joe Sakic is from Surrey.
Nice.
Isn't he? I think so. Anyway, keep going.
That would explain a lot, actually. So we, and I went ice skating one time.
Oh, no, it's Burnaby. Sorry, got this wrong.
Close.
Keep going.
And I went skating once with a friend of mine. We did half a session on a public session, and I vowed to never set foot on the ice again. I hated it. Just couldn't. And for all the other kids in Surrey, like skating was just not a thing. Hockey was not a thing, right?
Really?
As far as I remember,
right.
I don't know what we were doing. Getting into trouble, maybe. I think it's probably the pastime of most of us at that time. It was a pretty rough neighborhood, but I mean, sports were just not. They just weren't part of my group, my world.
Right.
It was so. Yeah, we the neighborhood kind of got rougher and rougher as the years went by, and my mom basically just decided to get us out of there. She was single mom working 2 jobs. We packed everything that we had into this little red Chevy Chevette, and we basically looked at a map, me, my brother, and my mom together, and sort of said, where are we going to go? How do we just escape this neighborhood, this life? And we looked at Kelowna. It was, 100,000 people. It was really booming at the time. She had basically enough money for 3 months of living with 2 kids, and, looked at the schools there. We drove, got there, and she just started looking for a job, and that was kind of like the start of a new life in a better community for our family.
And now is your mom still in Kelowna?
She's in Toronto now.
No, okay, so she moved east.
Yeah,
just follow
when I moved out here, they all moved out to get as close as they could. Yeah.
So how was Kelowna? I don't know. I know so little about Kelowna. Like they have a hockey team. That's all I know. Junior.
Well,
hockey
in fact,
team.
this is your listeners are going to love this. So I was the first mascot of the Kelowna.
No
Rockets.
way.
I was Rocky Raccoon when I was.
Speaking of the Beatles,
yeah,
I mean, Rocky Raccoon.
exactly.
You were the first.
The first, the intro when Rocky first went out on the ice and the fireworks were going off. That was me.
What? How old were you? How did you get that job? Tell me everything about this.
I don't remember how I got it. I remember how I got it because before that I had a weekend gig as Sonny the Sunripe Lion.
This is getting better by the minute.
So I started skating when I was 10 in Kelowna. I was in Kelowna for 8 years, so that was 18. During that time, I had 3 jobs, pretty much the entire time.
And going to school all at the same time?
Yeah, and skating. It was skating is extremely expensive, and I got competitive fairly quickly. So by the time I was 13, 14, I had one goal. It was Olympics or die, right?
Yeah. Isn't there like this if there were a movie about your life that would be like this scene, but didn't you tell your mom at 10? What was the story of that?
I forgot I told you that. Yeah. So it was the first skating lesson I had. I was on hockey skates. We got the Bauer skates at Canadian Tire, and the very first day on the ice, we started doing a couple of jumps. And I was 10. All the other junior instructors were all girls. They were all 10, and they all started crowding around. And I just had all this attention as I was nailing these jumps in my hockey skates. And I just everything about that, I just fell in love with it. And I left that day. I got my first badge. I was so excited. And my mom, a couple weeks later, got her first bill. And like I said, at this time she had just started. She was her first part-time job. She was looking for another one. And she sat me down and said, look, this is really expensive. You know, if you want to do this, I will always support you. Whatever your dreams are, know that. But there's 1,000,001 other sports we can do. And at that time, maybe a weekend, I said, no, I'm going to the Olympics. And that's it. And everything from this point on is for that. There was just I just knew that was my North Star.
Like a 10-year-old telling her mom he's going to the Olympics. I mean, so many 10-year-olds tell their mom they're going to go to the Olympics, but you actually did. Like, could you see, like, did she see in you, like, I think this kid is, like, really into this and I should really give it a shot?
Well, I found out years later, maybe 20 years later, that my mom was a swimmer and she couldn't continue because the family couldn't afford it. And I think she always kind of had that sitting somewhere. Like I said, for me, it never obviously occurred to me at that time.
Yeah.
So I think my mom basically had said, as long as you're working, as long as I see you first in, last out, working, putting everything you have to do in this, whatever the sacrifice is, we'll make it. And she, she made good on that, and I think so did I. So.
Did you get teased by all the boys for not playing hockey?
Yeah.
Being a figure skater? How did that go?
I don't know what it's like in high school these days, but I can tell you in the 90s in Kelowna, going through high school as a male figure skater, I mean, you learn to take your lumps. You learn to get punched in the face.
Like literally?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
you got punched in the face? That's more than bullying. I mean, that's like...
In their defense, I was a little lippy. Again, hindsight is 20/20.
Chirper, good trash talker.
Well, no, it was trash talking back because I was, it was constant. Like it was, twinkle toes, fairy, you name it, every day. And kids are relentless, man.
They're mean.
It was probably years before I was able to let go of some of that.
Really?
But no, and every once in a while I'd give it right back, and they let me know that they were bigger than me.
But I mean, could you hold your own?
No, no. Probably if I had been a fighter. Fortunately for me, my brother at that time was a weightlifter, and he was a big boy, and he would come to school every once in a while. And
younger or older?
2 years older.
Oh, so that's a good ally to have on your side.
Yeah.
So you start figure skating, and really quickly you get very competitive, and you have a goal in mind. It's the Olympics. But we're talking about how you got to the job of.
That's true. Yeah.
Being the how long did you do?
I was doing 3 things at the time. I was washing vans at Shaw Cable. I was doing weekends. I was a mascot, and the first mascot gig I had, I think it paid like $100 for the afternoon. And
that was huge.
At that time, at 15, 14 years old, that's massive, right? Yeah. And I knew. Even at that time, I knew that I was probably going to have to move out east to train because that's just where the best athletes in the country are. I kind of didn't know how or when, so I was just saving money. It was just like pay for skating, save money. Pay for skating, save money. And so I was working at PJ's All-Star Cafe, a restaurant that is, I think, now Milestones or something. But I was working at Shaw Cable, and then I was doing the mascot gig. And through that, I met Anne-Marie Hamilton and Bruce Hamilton, and
who, are they famous like figures?
No, they're I don't know if they still own the Rockets. I have no idea.
Oh, okay, they were the owners. Okay,
yeah. So they were managing the Rockets, and they sort of said, "Hey, we want to bring a mascot in, and we think you'd be great." And they were just so supportive for years. They were such a big part of all the support that I had in Kelowna. So.
How did the job go? Because usually when I think like mascot, I think of kids punching.
Oh yeah. Was that? But you know what? I was lucky. So look, if kids hit me, I would just sort of like knock them with my leg or my butt or whatever, right? And I have to say that was the single most fun job I ever had in my entire life. Hands down, by far.
I would have thought the exact opposite, to be honest.
It was so much fun.
Really?
It was like...
Why? What was it? What was it about?
So they had said to me that what they wanted early on was they wanted this raccoon who was sort of like rascally. This guy kind of got into trouble. Just don't be afraid to like mix it up. And
so shove the kid.
Yeah, I don't hurt anybody, but So
be entertaining.
That's it. So, I got to go on the ice and skate around during the intermission. And then, as a 16-year-old wearing that thing, I would walk into the beer garden during the, and like play around with people, knock over their beers, and like I would go sit in the stands and, I don't know, just play. It was fun. It was just a ton of fun.
Did someone like show you the ropes, or you just like
No, it was just go.
Did you like have to like do tricks through like a on fire ring or stuff like that? You did?
I don't know. We didn't jump through any fire rings, but there were fireworks at one point on the ice. There was like standing on the boards and jumping off of them. There was all that.
So you had some tricks to your.
I mean, I was at that time. I was a national figure skater.
Yeah,
I could skate,
sure.
but I don't know. A lot of it was just. It was almost like blowing off steam. It was just fun. Yeah.
And getting paid good money.
Yeah.
Did you remember having like the worst game or the best game or something? And
my experience there was really positive.
Cool.
I know the guy after me, and I won't name him. I'm not going to call you out. You know who you are. He ended up getting beaten up by some guys, and I think his story ended up in like ESPN or like in a major. Sports Illustrated. I think they did a piece on him getting beat up, but that was after I moved. So
Jesus. So you got the good part, and
it was only positive. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So what brought you to Montreal? Because you ended up coming straight to Montreal and not Toronto. So how did you were 19 at the time? I we're talking 1999 at this point.
This was 99. I was 18. So like I said, between like 14 and 18. I knew that I was going to have to move into another center. I didn't know how and the way that figure skating works, there's novice, junior, and senior. And in senior, those are the ones you see on TV, right? Yeah. That's the Olympic level. So I was in novice. We had done 2 years in novice. We were on our third year. I thought we were going to medal at nationals. But when we were out there, when you're, at least at that time, when we're training, you see the Quebecois and the Ontarians once a year. You see them at nationals. And every year you just get to nationals and you see them blow by you in the first practice. And it was just like, oh man, they're so good. and so, I came out with all this confidence. I thought we had trained really hard, and we got out to the first day and I kind of looked around. I was like, yeah, we're not winning a medal here. And we ended up 11th at that, in novice, right? So objectively not good. So, but I think I had about $4,000 saved. And in my mind, I looked at it and I was just like, look, I'm either going to take a real shot at this thing, or I've got to quit now and find my path. And by this point, I think I was working in the architecture department at Shaw. I'd graduated from high school, and I was given an offer to either move to Kamloops and help design their cabling systems, or jump on a plane and on a wing and a prayer and chase the dream. And so basically what I did is I looked at Barrie, Ontario, Toronto, and Montreal. This is where all the top teams in the country were training at the time. And I basically said, I want to be the best in the world, but if I can just get to one of those centers, all I'll ever need to do is just be the best one in that center. And I know with that, then I can be the best.
Yeah.
And so this was before I ever had a cell phone, right? 99. Jumped on a plane, said bye to my mom, and, just basically, said I'm going to get to Montreal. From there, I had planned a train to Toronto and a train to Barrie. And wherever I found a skating partner and a coach, I was just going to stay. And fortunately for me, I moved to Toronto. Got to Montreal, did my first tryout, and it was with a girl who had been, I think, the third-ranked junior team the year before. So in my mind, she was a star, and I was just like, "Wow, I get to skate with this girl." And the training there on the South Shore was a small center. Crazy hard trainer. All the stories you hear about these tough trainers. This was the guy. He was the toughest trainer in the sport.
How long were your training days? Because I think
so when I basically said I'll stay. So I never did the tour to Barrie and Toronto. I just stayed in Montreal.
Right. And what was the name?
His name was Paul. Name? Her name was Chantal Poirier, and his the coach is Paul Wirtz.
Paul Wirtz. He was from here, from
He's from Northern Ontario,
Okay.
but he had a center in Montreal for years, right? And it was just, he was notorious for training really hard and winning. And this was the whole thing. It's just all the skaters, they came out, when you saw them at competitions, they all just had this like, you know, when somebody rounds a corner and the speed and the perfection of every step is just like, oh my God, like how do they do that, right? So, bless you. So,
He showed you the meaning of hard work.
yeah. Our first day, our very first day, we, I mean, it was a 12-hour day, and
Literally.
got to
On
the
the
rink.
ice. Or
Not
what's
on the ice.
what's
Yeah.
off
So
ice?
we were on the ice at 6. So we were off, warming up at 5:30. We went straight through from 6 to 11 the first day. And when I say straight through, I'd never conceived of training this way. It was nonstop. It was, like again.
When's the water break?
Great.
Yeah.
Now try this.
Yeah.
And something about halfway through that, I was more tired than I had ever been. I just like, my legs aren't working. I'm shaking. I need food, and we just went straight through, and it's day one, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah.
Went from 11, and he basically said, okay, great. Get off, go do some off ice, maybe do some run a little bit, whatever. And I'll see you again at 4. And so what I didn't realize is that he was going to have tabs on every minute that I was off the ice, and he was watching upstairs while I was running back and forth, while I was stretching. And what I learned that day as well is that if you're in the arena, you're moving, you're working, whatever you're doing. And so, I kind of grabbed whatever food I was available at the rink. I packed a small lunch for myself. I didn't realize. Yeah, pretty much. And got back on the ice at 4 and worked until 6. And he just there was just a different mentality, right? It was like, when you, I had probably, when you hear about a clean program, people talk about a clean program. It's, you have all of your elements and you don't miss anything.
Yeah.
He would tell you, I want to see a clean program today. And it was laughable. It was like, I've done one clean program in the last 3 years, and I try to do it clean every day, but what do you mean? And he would just say, well, you don't get off the ice until you do a clean program. And you got to realize, a long program is 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Your heart rate is sort of above 200. You're getting that like dizzy, can't feel your arms in one program, right? So when he's like, well, it might take me 15 programs to do this, right? And nobody's ever done 15. And he would just, yeah, okay. Well, if it takes you 15, it takes you 15. If it takes you 1, it takes you 1. Do a clean one. And I look at the other skaters like, what do you mean clean? And I'll never forget it. One of the skaters, just this like grizzled veteran, he sort of just looked at me and pointed at his head and just like, just nodded.
Yeah.
He said, do a clean program. And I looked over, and the guy's just pointing at his head and nodding at me. And it was like, oh, okay. Whatever that means.
Yeah. Like, what did it mean? Like mental toughness, or like?
Yeah, it's all right there.
Yeah.
It's you're going to break physically, but never break mentally, and recognize that, yes, you can do a clean program. Yes, everything you do can be perfect. Yes, it has to be. And go, and just don't ever break mentally. Lean in, right? And it was just, I realized this was day one. I realized that I was in a different world.
We hear all these stories with like coaches and like figure skaters, because it's such a different dynamic opposed to a sports group. I played hockey, for instance. Like, there's 20 of us and there's one coach. But the relationship, and like the same is for tennis players. It's a very intense relationship with the coach. And in your case, you were usually two of you with the girl, and so you're like, there's I guess a different dynamic, but it's a very intense relationship with the coach. Like, how does it get sometimes like overboard, and like how does this like?
Well, so Paul was a different beast. He was different than any other coach I worked with, and in fact, I'll talk later about other coaches, but the philosophy to training at that time, at 18 years old, was exactly what I needed. Mm-hmm. And frankly, a lot of kids broke in that center, didn't make it, and I saw them try to pick up their lives for years after this, because it's just in that kind of intensity, there's a real fear, right? When you get there, you've got to, when you walk in the arena, from the second you get in, you have to be perfect. Right, and if you're not, you're going to continue to push hard and harder and harder until you are, and it's a fear is probably the best word I can come up with. But I remember Paul used to have this change in his pockets, and he would play with it. And if there are any skaters listening right now, they'll know the sound of that change. Because I hear change
trauma.
To this day. I hear somebody playing with change in their pockets, and I'm like, whoa, posture. So that, it was definitely intense. It was definitely every day filled with fear. But every other thing in my life was kind of cut out and put behind a moat. And all there was winning. And it was just, I don't think athletes can or should keep that up for years or into their later careers. But for that period in my life, I learned what hard work is. I learned that my own limits were nothing, that I didn't even understand my own limits, and that they could be pushed much harder than I thought they would be. And that's a lesson that I took with me through, that I've taken with me through everything that I've done in my life.
Do you sometimes think about everything you've learned in figure skating and how it shaped the person you are today? And
all the time. All the time.
When you see, what are the main tools that you got from figure skating that you still to this day like?
So the first I just described, and it's discipline. It's throwing away your limits. The other, and I don't know if this is unique to skating. In fact, I think it actually is true in hockey as well. But creativity, I think there is room for creativity in absolutely every function of every job, or in everything that you approach in life. And that's the thing. So in skating, the way that we would approach creativity, it had a framework. Yeah. So the season ends, and you start to put together your new programs in sort of March, April, May, kind of, and then you're working on all these new elements, these new lifts, these new throws, these new, and you're trying to break the mold of what anybody's ever done, right? And you're putting all this interesting time in these weird lifts, or these weird, what if we try this grip? What if we, and you're trying to kind of reinvent yourself and reinvent the sport over those few months. When you kind of have something, you might have 10 new things that you've come up with. You're going to whittle it down to one between, June and the end of August. And that's really when you start training your programs and you start trying to put it in as an element that you're going to compete with. And so there becomes this sort of a whittling down of ideas into the sort of things that will work, right? And we talked about this with your comedy, right? As your process of coming up with a bit, as an example. You come up with it, but you have to put in the time to go over and over and over and do it and try it a different way. Yeah. You've got to put it in a program where I'm going to do it when I'm so tired I can barely breathe, right? And so at the end of the day, you end up with hopefully a perfectly executed program by September when the season starts, but with some amount of the initial creativity that you put in. But it's a different thing than when you started early on. And I think getting the discipline of creativity, and when you approach a new product or a new idea or anything, giving that period of time where there are no rules is critical. It's critical to, like I said, everything in my life, from work to relationships to, charity work, you name it. And so that, I think, is something that I really learned from skating. And then, like I said, no limits, no boundaries, push harder. I'm
happy you're bringing the topic of creativity, because I wanted to ask you about, because I know so little about figure skating, and we watch it on TV on the Olympics, and we're like, how are we supposed to look at this? Like, what are the things we should? I wanted to know, how do you guys? Because you've mentioned how you build a program, but you usually have a choreographer, so there's someone who's how involved. Because that's the thing I like about figure skating. It's sports is sports, and usually arts are arts, and they're two different things. But figure skating is the ultimate combination of arts and sports. Like, you guys are dancing on skates. That's what you guys are doing at very high speed and like in a very elite manner. Are you guys involved in the creative process? Can you go, or the choreographer is like, oh no, hold back, this is my. And like, who are the choreographers? Like, who are those persons? Are they former skaters? Are they?
Yeah.
Like, so many questions.
So you're right. It is a separate thing. You do have a choreographer who does your programs, and then will come back in and tweak and then work with you. Every center does it slightly different.
Is the choreographer? I have a hard time with this word. Is that person the coach or not? It's a different person.
It depends.
It depends. Can be the coach.
What you tend to see at the elite level is that they're not. You do see separate coach and choreographer.
All right, cool.
When you get into sort of junior and novice, you might see some, and there may be some rare cases where you do see some of it. But for the most part, the choreographer is the choreographer.
Right.
I mean, I had the opportunity to work with one of, I think, the greatest choreographers that the sport has ever seen.
Really?
And yeah, Julie Marcotte. She's on the South Shore here in Montreal.
Is she the one who married Bruno Marcotte? Or that's a different sister.
Yeah, there you know Bruno.
Well, I read about you, so now since last night I do, because he's a coach who married a figure skater.
Yeah, he married my former skating partner.
Exactly, that's how I got around to him.
Yeah,
right.
So Julie, when we first met her, was she's a dance coach. So dance and pair skating are two different things, and I did pair skating with all the throws and the lifts and the jumps and sort of the big elements. So she was a dance coach doing some choreography at the time, and she really, her choreography career just really from around that time, early 2000s onward, just kind of built and built and built. And now, I mean, I think most of the skaters you see at the elite level, she's had some influence over somewhere, whether she's doing their programs or has worked with them in the past or something. So she really is just a prolific choreographer.
Does she like do it custom for each pair? Does she like work on her own, and then she comes up with like I wonder like how does she come up with which songs and like the moves?
This is the thing. What I find she's brilliant at is that she sort of customizes her approach depending on the skater. And what she does better than anybody is she finds a way to figure out. It's going to sound corny, but what's in your soul, right? Like, what is it that is driving you? What are your dreams this year? What are your fears? And she'll sort of start from maybe a concept of some sort, but she'll sort of pull out of you what's already in there. And in that, like, it's kind of difficult to describe, but you might work with her a little bit. She'll give, she'll listen, she'll pull out of you, and at some point she'll sort of work with whatever energy is kind of right, like whatever the right mix of that is. Yeah. And I like I said, much like with Paul, like in a very different way, she pulled some creativity out of me that I didn't know existed, right? Like some thing where I was able to stop thinking through skating and stop, just like executing on it. And I actually started to kind of like feel my way through the sport. And I know that sounds kind of out there.
No, but it really interests me. So, and I wonder, like, how does she get paid? You guys pay her, like you buy her a routine or
her time? Yeah. Right, so she would charge by the program, and then you've got kind of an hourly fee for follow up and stuff. So we would do like actual skating lessons with her, like, basic skating lessons on ankle bending and exercises and things like that.
Okay, so it's more than just handing you over the
Again, it depends. In this case with Julie, that's exactly what it was. And we were just much better skaters because of all of that work.
Right.
So yeah.
I also wanted to ask you kind of a beginner's guide to watching figure skating. What should we be looking at when we're, in your case, let's talk about pair figure. Is it how it's
pairs?
called?
Yeah.
Pairs, yeah. So when we're watching it, like, because in French you've probably heard of this guy, Alain Goldberg. Have you heard?
Yeah.
He's like, people...
C'est magnifique! Yeah. So the first time I heard that guy, I didn't speak a word of French. And I was just like, man, I got to meet this guy. He sounds fascinating. Listen to the intensity in this man's voice.
He's so passionate about it. You can't help but, start getting into it, because he's like, attention, c'est parti. And I guess it's like, holy shit, what's happening? Like,
that was impressive.
You don't even see the guy, but his voice, and he's kind of like speaking a very like soft, like just like not trying to get into like breaking the mood here. And anyway, but he's so funny. So like half people I think tune in just to get like into the mood, and like he gives such a good show. But like what should we be looking at when we're watching? Because when you know nothing about it, like of course I guess like
a part of it is
Well,
are you moved by it? Because that's the goal, right? Like that's
so beginner's guide. If I were today, so I actually did this with like hockey as an example. Coming in as an outsider,
Right.
I'm like, how do I learn how to watch hockey? Right. So as a beginner's guide, what I would do with figure skating is, number one, I would start with like the biggest competitions of the year. I would start with the Olympics or the World Championships.
Right.
Olympics every 4 years, Worlds every year.
The best ones.
2024, actually, the World Championships are going to be here in Montreal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
What
Any
arena?
hockey fans out there? I imagine Bell Center.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I may be wrong.
Okay, but that's interesting. I didn't even know that. So.
Yep. Yeah. So it'll be all the best skaters in the world. I would start there. The way the programs generally work, the order is the top ranked skaters go last.
Really?
So you see basically flights of 5 or 6 skaters. So go watch the top 2 flights, the last 2 flights. Whether it's men, ladies, pairs dance, just go watch the last 2 flights. So to start there, right? Like as an intro hockey fan, you probably want to watch, I don't know, Connor McDavid take off from the red line, right?
Because even if you know nothing, you're like, oh, that's interesting.
That's impressive.
This guy's good.
Yeah, exactly. And then from there, it's a combination of technicality, which is like just listen to the commentators. They'll usually talk about the big hard elements, and then it just comes down to like, what style do you like, right? And I love that about the sport. It really, and that is always the big debate in skating. And you hear these judging controversies and this and that. I hope that never leaves. I love the fact that you can just watch it, and really whichever style you like, you're not wrong. Art can never be wrong, right? And especially when you're talking about the top few in the world, they're so close that, there's usually 1 or 2 that breaks away that are just like, oh my God, there's them and everybody else.
Yeah.
And then from there, like I said, your sort of top 5 you're gonna see the best in the world and figure out what style you like. Do you like powerful, gritty skating? Do you like just simple perfection? It really is
elegant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So just go and watch some, and you're gonna figure out like pretty much like what you like. It's like music genres.
Exactly.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. When you moved to Montreal, I got to ask you as a fellow, because you're coming from Western Canada, what was coming to Montreal? What was because I was just in Calgary a few days ago, and I just keep trying to get my brother back here, and his girlfriend is actually from Ontario, but they live in Calgary. They met in Calgary, and she doesn't speak French. She speaks Chinese, Mandarin and English, I can really see that like the French thing really worries her and stuff, and I'm gonna get a job and this and that, and I was wondering, from the Western Canadian perspective, when you came over, the whole but if you go to Montreal, they speak French there. But how did you come about? Were you scared? Were you like, I'm just going to learn it? What was your take on the whole? And
well, I had kind of a false start on the French side when I first moved.
Yeah, what happened?
So Paul trained in Candiac on the South Shore.
Yeah,
very French, but we were in a bubble, right? We were like 6 pair. Actually, no, we were 3 pair teams and like a few juniors. It was a very English school, and all we did was train. So it's like we never had any opportunity to ever get out and do anything. We were just in that bubble. We could have been in anywhere in the world, right?
Let alone speak French.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't much of an issue. I mean, my first experience with French, we had a show, I think about a month after landing in Montreal in Rouyn-Noranda.
Well, there you go.
So I got to get like, at least thrown in the mix.
Yeah.
But we trained there for 2 years. After that, Paul Center moved to Toronto in like 2002. And then my partner and I ended up leaving Paul's school and coming back to Montreal to train with another trainer here. And that's really when I actually had a more balanced life and ended up going and, so when I moved back to Montreal, did not speak a word of French, and basically said, that's it, I am going to learn. And so I went and got a job in retail, just managed, it was a skate shop, Maison de Patin in Saint-Léonard.
Yeah.
Shout out Steve. And went there and basically, half the clientele that are coming through are speaking French. And
Italian in your case.
Italian, French. But within sort of 6 months, I was selling skates in French. And,
there you go.
And, you just sort of snowball from there. Yeah, that's the only way to learn is you got to throw yourself in the middle of the fire.
Yeah. That's the only. That's a good word, but it didn't scare you or anything, or in any way, or
not so much.
Or did you have like a bad experience coming in and feeling like
I didn't have a bad experience. I think I had the traditional, outsider bitterness where I was just like, I'm not getting the same service, or
yeah.
But I think what happened was when I actually learned the language, I started to understand the nuance. I started to understand the sense of humor, the culture. And I realize now it's its own thing, and it's actually really cool. But you have to understand the language in order to be able to soak that up and experience it.
For sure.
And so when I really learned, when I first was able to just sit in a group and listen to French and speak it, and that's really when I fell in love with the province. Like I really sort of got it,
Because you decided to stay, which you were not like forced to. You could have moved, and you still stayed in Montreal. So I guess you enjoyed.
Well, look, I mean the top athletes in the country and actually in the world, many of the top skaters in the world are all in Montreal.
Yeah. I meant like after skating, you could have gone anywhere.
I met my wife. So what are you going to do?
Is she French Canadian?
No. She's her first language is French, but she's perfectly bilingual. But she's from Montreal. So.
So is she from the West Island?
Downtown.
Oh, okay, cool. Because that's usually where the fluently. Speaking of French speakers, most of your partner were French speaking. You were like Valérie Marcoux. You've had like a lot of French Canadian girls as a partner. Am I wrong? Or
well, so we all spoke. Actually, Val was really the only.
Oh, they have French name anyway.
Yeah, so she was English.
Was she?
Chantal Poirier was English, spoke French.
Because they had French names, I just assumed they were all French.
So Valérie Marcoux she is French, but she and I actually dated for a couple of years before we skated together.
Really?
So we had a couple of years behind us before we ever started skating.
So you dated before being a pair?
Yeah. So I mean, rewind back to our story when we was in Paul's school for 2 years in Candiac. Paul moved to Toronto. The whole center basically picked up and moved with him. I started dating Val kind of around that time, or maybe just before. But I was still skating with Chantal. For a million and one reasons, Chantal and I broke up. We ended up looking for other partners, and I found myself without a partner for a year. Val skated with Bruno Marcotte for a couple of years. They made a name for themselves on the senior circuit and competed at Worlds, and at some point we just realized that it was, we were roughly the same, skill set. We obviously got along very well.
Yeah. It wasn't awkward or anything.
It wasn't. In fact, most pair, like 75% of pair teams, at least when I skated, were dating. I don't know what the number is now, but it's very, very common. It's probably a little more rare to be dating first and then skate together, but it does happen. It's
they usually start skating together and then
one thing leads to another.
Well, I remember Jamie Sally and David Pelletier used to be a couple. And he's a guy from Quebec.
I know Dave well.
He actually works, or at least did work for the Oilers at one point.
That's how we got one of our first contracts. One of our first, actually not even contracts. The first time we opened a relationship with an NHL team, it was through Dave. I called him and I was just like, we got this thing, and we made some introductions. Yeah.
Oh,
at the time, we weren't even SportLogik. We were just a couple of guys with some data.
So is he still working for the Oilers at this point?
I haven't spoken to him in a couple of years. I'm actually not sure where he's at right now.
Because that's as a very casual fan, the one thing I remember the most about figure skating was the 2002 Olympics. Watching their routine, and I remember Alain Goldberg was completely off his out of his mind. He was it was a perfect 10 out of 10. It was just a clean routine as Paul was clean. It was completely. It was wow, this was really good. And then them not winning, I was like, well, I don't know nothing about this sport, but it seemed like they were
it was
pretty good.
It was an interesting time. So 2002, the Olympics were in Salt Lake City. Yep. Jamie Soleil and David Pelletier, the Canadian pair, their style of skating was very Canadian. And I mean that in a good way. Canadian meaning their personalities came out. You could see their relationship when they skated. You could, they had this magic, this chemistry together that it's very difficult to teach. They had just this certain magic. The Russian pair team, Elena Berezhnaya and Anton Sigerlitzy, were the perfect Russian pair. And by that, I mean that in a positive way. absolute perfection in simplicity, meaning they had these perfect lines. They could do one crossover in perfectly and go faster than any skater you'd ever seen. So they had this perfect speed, this perfect, like just two totally different styles. How you compare them, I have no idea. It depends probably on your preference. Jamie Salé and David Peltier skated perfectly. Anton and Elena, I think, missed a jump or stepped out, or there was like one error. And the marks came up and the judging panel was split. And the Russians won, and it was just, you heard boo throughout the stadium, and then I think the next day or within a couple days, the French judge came out and said, I was influenced by this other side, and therefore I made my vote this way so that the French dancers could get this. There was a trade, or there was a controversy. And so just to give everybody kind of the context of that. Now, what happened after that was just pandemonium. The Olympics were upside down. They ended up actually giving 2 gold medals, a gold medal to each one of them. But the International Olympic Committee came out and said, figure skating, you got to solve your issues here. They upended the entire judging system, threw it out, and said, start from scratch, and if you can't, you're out of the Olympics.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
So the International Skating Union came back and redesigned the entire judging system, where they separated the technical judges from kind of the judges panel. So the technical judges say, this jump is a triple Lutz, therefore it's worth this specific base mark. And then all the judges give it, say, a plus or minus 5 based on how well it was done. Wow. Then from there, all the judges give a separate artistic score for different components of the programs. So the judging system became much more objective, much more difficult to sort of fudge, but also much more difficult for fans to understand. So before it was just, you put up 6.0, congratulations, perfect, right? And so there was sort of a long debate around which was better, which was, tougher for the fans. And look, this is 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah, 21 years ago now.
Yeah. And I think people still call it the new judging system.
Yeah, is it? And how has it changed, like from the skater's perspective?
Completely changed. Yeah, so... Oh my God! I'm trying to think of a hockey analogy.
Were you upset about the change at the time? Were you? How did you?
Just something we navigated. So Val and I, we won our first national title with the old judging system, and then for the first year, they basically had this interim judging system where they kind of just made some new halfway type judging system. We won our second national title under that system. And then when the new system came out the next year, we won our third national title with the new system. So we actually got to win a national title with each one.
In different eras in a way.
And it was the biggest thing was that it was very specific marks were now given for spins or step sequences or, program component scores. And so you had to get really good at things that before we would kind of just were throwaway elements, right? It's like we used to use the spins as like breathing time. Whereas then suddenly it was like, no, I got to put in this many changes and so spins started becoming 30 seconds and all these other elements started getting crazy hard. So what I think the fans now get is a sport that is much harder. Just the comprehensiveness and the difficulty in the steps is just off the charts. And that hasn't slowed down the jumps. You still see these huge quads being done, in every competition. So I think it's made it better.
So you were national champions from 2004 to 2006, if I'm correct. Was that with Val?
It was.
So, and then I guess you got your eyes on the Olympics in Italy at this time.
No, So the Olympics were in Italy in 2006. We were kind of just getting there. We kind of performed okay at the Olympics. We came 11th. The World Championships was like 2 weeks later in Calgary.
2 weeks later?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Wow, that's like...
Yeah.
You just came from the Olympics. Like.
Yep, that's how it goes. So it was a couple weeks later in Calgary, and we came 5th, and we were almost 4th, actually. It was sort of close. We were 4th after the short. So you can kind of tell the range where we were at kind of in our career. So we were high of 5th, maybe low of 11th, right? Kind of in that range on the world stage. So the way that... the skating works, or amateur sports and probably in general, there's these 4-year cycles. So after 2006, there's going to be a bunch of retirements. There's going to be some improvement, some jockeying. The other thing is that the Olympics were announced in 2010. They were going to be in Vancouver. Again, my hometown. Like, how many times as an athlete do you get to have an Olympics in your hometown? So in my mind, it was just like, the stars are lining up. In 2007, we were ranked overall on the World Series, like the World Circuit. I think we were sort of 4th overall leading into the Grand Prix final. So it's like we were on the heels of a podium 3.5, 4 years out of an Olympics in my hometown. So with the right work, we probably could have been in medal contention. So in my mind, it's like everything's coming up roses where, stars are aligning, dreams coming true. We're on our way. So I think, 2006, 2007, that was really an exciting time of like, the seas are parting for us alone and we're going. So, it was,
So then the plan, you have a plan, you have your eyes, on the Olympics. I think 2008 or was
2007. Yeah.
7, 8. What happened? There's I think something involving your shoulder at one point.
Oh yeah. Well it's actually, oh my God, I actually forgot. You're right. So I, a couple things happened. One is in 2005 or so, I had torn my rotator cuff in 3 places. I had it rebuilt. So they put the mesh in, the whole thing. So during the time while Val and I were making our way up, a few other bumps and bruises and breaks and things, but nothing crazy. That was a bad one. But rehab that, worked really hard, got back. 2007, somewhat unexpected to me. Val kind of one day just, I could see her passion was waning. She's 27 years old, so was I. For her dream was to go to the Olympics. She never really dreamed of 2010, and in hindsight, I think I was really pushing that to say, this is our dream, this is our goal.
Yeah.
She wanted, we had, by this point, years earlier, we had broken up. She had met another guy. She wanted to go make babies and get on with her life.
Yeah.
And at 27, having just achieved her dream at the Olympics, you can't really blame her. So for her heart was kind of not in it, and I think she was kind of doing it out of obligation. And for anybody who's worked on a team, that if somebody's just working, no matter how hard they work, if they're not driven at their core to do that thing, you're only ever going to be able to push so hard. Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing is if somebody's heart isn't in it, there's no chance. And so Val in 2007 decided to retire. And so here I was, 2.5, 3 years out of an Olympics in my hometown, suddenly with no partner. And the way that skating goes, you don't find a skating partner who's at that level and just get there. It's so rare. It's maybe been done a couple of times. And so, by all stretches of the imagination, I was done. So I wanted to give it everything that I could, because I also knew at that time that I hadn't personally maxed out. I knew that I could be better, and I always felt that there was this 10% remaining that I could get to,
Yep.
So I was kind of frustrated knowing that, number one, I had never achieved my own potential, and that was probably the biggest one. And number two, that I never had the chance to go for that dream in Vancouver. And so basically, I put videos together, I made phone calls, I reached out to like 120 some odd different nations within the international skating unit, just like, here I am, here's what I do. I'm looking for a partner who's 5 feet tall who can land a triple toe jump, right? And that's it. That's the only requirement. 5 feet tall, triple jump. Yeah. That's it. And so didn't find anybody there. I ended up getting in the car and driving something like 5,000 kilometers across North America, basically going into every recreational arena I could find, any coach, any choreographer, any skater, anywhere in North America, I was going to find her. Or I was going to die trying, and at least I would know that I tried. I ended up meeting Megan Duhamel. She had been a national level pair skater and single skater. She was off on an injury. She was not a world-class skater at the time, but she had a ton of potential. And I remember knowing that she had a work ethic like beyond most skaters that you'll ever meet. So she had been off with this injury. She was she's from Lively, Ontario, and basically we did the tryout, and I had done, I don't know how many other tryouts, 20, 30 tryouts with every level of skater. My body was beaten up. And remember, I'm like 27, 28 years old at this time, doing these crazy days, doing lifts with girls who not used to being lifted. Your timing's off. You're beating your body up pretty hard. So tried out with Megan. it clicked day one. It was May of 2000. I'm gonna say 7, 8, almost. Yeah, it was heading into the 2008 season. Basically, we started putting in 12-hour days again. It went right back to when I was 18 years old, right? Except with a body that was not designed for that kind of work, and just worked our asses off. And I mean, like, you know, back to the break your perceptions of what is possible. We made it to our first national, so we had to prove ourselves. We had to go to all the regional competitions, we had to qualify nationally, which I hadn't done in 7 years.
Yeah. Back to square one.
Yeah, back to square one. We had to earn every single point, and with every competition we did, it was like, if you don't do this, you don't qualify for the next thing. So if you don't go to regionals, you don't qualify for nationals. If you don't go to nationals, you don't go to worlds. If you don't go to worlds, you don't have enough points to go to the Olympics. So it was like every single step was critical. Qualified for nationals, I think we came second at our first nationals.
Not too
and
bad.
we ended up having, and then this is to your point. The day after nationals, we did a lift in the show, and I heard a loud pop again in my shoulder.
Oh, same shoulder? Or
same shoulder.
Oh, God.
Yeah, popped it out, blew it out worse than it had been a couple of years earlier. You know, it clearly was due to overtraining and lack of timing, which there was no avoiding that. So we didn't have time to rebuild it. Worlds were in March, so we had 3 months to basically train. So we just started learning lifts on the other arm, basically learning all of our elements with the other hand, doing everything, rehabbing, doing everything that we could do, and then we're gonna get the thing fixed after Worlds. Went to our first World Championships. We've been together for 7 months with one working arm, and we ended up 6th. So,
not too bad, huh?
Not bad. So again, within striking distance. So got it fixed. We ended up the next year, didn't get all the training we needed to, and we ended up missing the games basically by one spot in 2010. We missed it by like 0.3 or 0.4. It was really close. But you know, and I know it's a crappy ending to the story, but the reality is I left the rink that day more satisfied than I'd ever been, because at least at that point when I walked out after the national championships and we didn't qualify, I was like, well, I couldn't have given anything more. Like, you know, I literally, that was as far as my capacity in the sport was. It was as good as I was ever going to be, and that's what it was. Mm-hmm. And so there was this acceptance leaving sport that so few athletes get. So it was very bittersweet, but at the same time, you know, here we are, I don't know, 15 years later or 13 years later, and I'm perfectly content with everything that I achieved, everything I didn't achieve. So, what
are you most proud of out of your figure skating career?
I'm proud of that chance I took. That 2008 season, going out, taking a risk on Megan. I mean, we lost all our funding. It was funny. All the people who are around you when you're on top, they all go away really quickly. And when you're starting, you get at the bottom. We went to our first international competition. We came last. You know, like. And suddenly you just realize when all the hype is out of the room, you get a real picture of what's real and what's not. And I never would have had that if I didn't if I had done the logical, rational thing, which was quit. Yeah. So
I find it pretty cool that that's the first thing that comes to your mind, and you didn't go straight for the Olympics. You went like, yeah, I did the Olympics, which was the first dream. But what about the one after, where like that's where it got actually hard? And you had to find something, which was kind of impossible, but you still got around to it.
It's
and you brought your mom.
The struggle.
You brought your mom to the Olympics, didn't you?
Yeah.
How
my mom
cool
and my
is
brother.
that?
It was. I get goosebumps as you say it. I have goosebumps. Yeah, I remember our first national championships, the standing ovation, and mom running down, and like. So there's all those moments, but you know the ones that you really take away, I find anyway, are it's just like when you survive the struggle. that for me is kind of the thing. But yeah.
That's awesome. And there's one you didn't tell, but the Eric Bompard. Yeah. Go on YouTube, Google Craig Buntin, Eric Bompard competition. That's 2008, if I'm correct. The one where you got your hands.
Oh my God, you're right. That was the same season. Yeah. So that was the same season of the. It was the season after the shoulder injury. Yeah. So that was we had only been back after the shoulder surgery for a handful of months. And yeah, we were mid competition and got kicked in the hand, and I don't know what it cut, but it cut something that bled a lot.
Like right in the middle of your...
Yeah, right in the middle of the performance. And the reason why I was so insistent in starting after they stopped the music was that you've got, I think, like a minute or 2 minutes. There's a certain amount of time that you had before you've got to get back into the program. Otherwise, you're disqualified.
Because I didn't know you were even allowed to stop and
I was bleeding everywhere. I had no choice.
But I thought you were just...
The video's gnarly if anybody wants to go watch it. But you've got a minute or so before you've got to start. Otherwise, you're disqualified. And had we been disqualified, we wouldn't have had the international points to make it to the games. So it was all like, as the blade went through the hand, I kind of looked at it. It was just like, oh man, we don't have time for this. Like, we need these international points. So I was just, I was saying to them at the side, like, stitch it. I don't care. Like, stitch it, bandage it. You got 30 seconds. I don't care. Go
quick. And you went back.
Yeah, we had a great performance.
You won the bronze.
We did. Yeah.
With your hand sliced.
And I'm trying to think of if it must have been our second Grand Prix season, but we needed those points. I remember we had to be in the top 3 there. So
I love that. Like, with your hand slice, you still won. Like, got on the podium, and I read that it's you were the first to land you would say, I don't know how to pronounce it, but a throw triple Lutz.
Were we the first?
Like in the national, something like that. Something on Wikipedia that was written. I was like, or in the national or something like that. I don't. First, I can't remember the entire details.
No, actually, I don't. I feel like somebody would have told me that.
It's
entirely possible. So look, and I take no credit for that, by the way. Megan was an incredible athlete, and she went on, by the way, after I retired in 2010. She went on to become multiple world champion, Olympic.
Did she?
Yeah, multiple medals at Olympics. One of the top skaters in Canadian history. So with her partner, who I had trained with as well, Eric Radford at the time. So she was an amazing. Yeah. It turns out
you're a good scout.
Yeah, I guess. So that, I mean, if there were any records set on any elements, it was credit to her. I was just the guy doing the throwing.
I'm gonna find the I think it's on your Wikipedia or something like that. I'm gonna find it. What's
wow?
The whole,
well, that'd be cool.
Something about being the first. Maybe in the nationals. I can't remember. I'm gonna look it up, but. Coming to your retirement, where you did a TED Talk presentation in which you mentioned that one of your biggest successes was not qualifying for the Vancouver Olympics. Yeah. It made you kind of come to this,
Well, it helped kind of redefine. I kind of touched on it, but you redefine success, right?
Yeah.
You're exactly right. When you ask me what is the thing that's most memorable, it really was that, like, taking a leap and going for the impossible. It's like, you're never going to go wrong if you chase a dream, right? That no matter how you get from point A to point B, if that thing is in your heart and it's there and it's not leaving, you'll never go wrong chasing it.
I think it's the failing that scares people away. They're like, but if I fail, it's like, but like.
So Bill Burr actually, he touched on this. I don't know if it was in his podcast or when it was, but he was saying at one point he had this gig where I think he made $8 at this gig, and he went out and after he had been working on this new bit, and for the first time it landed, and he kind of went home and he was doing this dumb dance in his kitchen, and he was dating somebody at the time, and the person said to him, I hope one day I can have a job that pays me $8, but I'm so happy with it that I do this dance in my kitchen, and that's what it is. It comes down to this thing that if you've got this vision, this dream, this North Star, you'll never be wrong chasing it. Mm-hmm. And so, and what I learned was, like, ultimately, if you chase that with everything you've got and you put everything on the line for it, that's success, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if I can come to the end of my life someday and look back and know that whatever it was that I was chasing, I was putting everything into, that's success. Yeah. It's not about the medals. In fact, if you ever meet an Olympic medalist, ask them where their medal is. 9 times out of 10, you'll hear it's in the trunk of their car somewhere, and maybe they sold the car. You'll
forgot to take it out.
Yeah, it's somewhere, right? It's under a pile of clothes somewhere. It's not about the podium, the win, the medal. It's about the fight. It's about the chasing that dream. And I guess I kind of needed the failure at the end of it to kind of drive that point home. Yeah. Because, like I said, that feeling I had when I left skating was like, I did it. It was like total satisfaction, as if I had won a medal. I did it. I did everything that I came here to do. And you
did, yeah.
So
once it's over, and I mean, figure skating is like just such a huge part of your identity up to that point. It's like what you've been your whole life, what you've been doing every day. Like you said, you're in a bubble when you're a high, elite athlete, and when you're done with figure skating, like, what's it like when you're like, okay, now what?
You talk to a lot of athletes about this, and I had asked, I think, before we started recording, if there had been other elite players on the podcast, because every athlete sees it, and I'm sure everybody who's kind of at an elite level in a specific thing, if ever that thing ends. So the thing about being an athlete is it's not like I did figure skating. It's I was a figure skater, right? It's I didn't train as an athlete. I am an athlete. And so it's this sort of identity that is tied to this thing that you're doing, and you're really good at that thing. And over the years, you've sort of whittled away all of the unimportant things so that this one thing can be the priority. If you don't go home for Christmas one year, your family's going to understand. You're training for the Olympics. Yeah, of course. But you know what? When you retire, get your ass to I don't care what you've got. It's not as important as this. And so there's this sort of number one, you're basically a child. I was 29, almost 30 years old. I had no plan B. I had no education. There's nothing I ever wanted to do other than the Olympics. And so for me, it was just like, who am I? Number one, walking into a room and accepting that I'm just an average dude in this room was really, it sounds arrogant, but it was tough. It was tough because, suddenly I'm walking into a room of people who are really qualified at all of the things that they're doing, and I'm not really qualified to do anything. So there's all of that. And all of the sort of, difficulty that comes with that, and plus, finding that I had that Olympic North Star for 20 years, so suddenly that's gone. Yeah. And having as well just this sort of identity crisis. Who am I? Not what am I going to do, but who am I? And it's a hell of a thing to get over.
How do you get over it? How do you find your way?
I think everybody's got their own path. Mine was no fun. I decided to be, I kind of look back at my experience and said, where have I had success? And I look back at that, 2-3 year period in my life when I was 18 and how hard I worked. So I just figured I'm going to get to work. So I started a company. I started a coffee company at the time, financed it on credit cards, got out there, started hustling and, roasting my own coffee and getting out into cafes and, just hustled, was working crazy days. Just feeling totally lost, but just like burying myself in work. Ended up getting into about 100 cafes across the country. I decided to take some night courses to figure out how to build this business. I ended up meeting somebody at McGill from the MBA. They had said, why don't you go write the GMAT and see if you can apply for the MBA? And maybe we'll make an exception and skip the undergrad and go straight to the MBA. It's like, sure. I went home and Googled, like, what is a GMAT? Okay.
And for people, like, what is a GMAT actually for?
So a GMAT is, it's kind of like an entrance exam that does very basic math and English skills. Not very basic. I mean, it's to test your sort of ease and competency in those areas.
That's right. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, pretty much. And so you're supposed to study for it for a while. But like a psycho, I think I studied for about a month. I put in 20-hour days, closed myself in a room and just went like 4 a.m. to midnight, straight through 7 days a week for a month.
You applied the Paul.
Yeah, exactly, which is unhealthy. Don't do it if you're thinking about it. But I ended up doing well enough. They made an exception. I ended up getting into the MBA. And so I found myself basically within 6 months of being a full-time athlete to suddenly running my own business while being in a full-time MBA program. Which again, and I decided at that time too, I'd met my girlfriend and proposed, so we were planning our wedding, and I mean, it was just absolute insanity, morning to night, almost no sleep, terrible food for probably about 3 years, running myself into a physical wall for 3 years. So, there are better ways of doing it. There wasn't a whole lot of self-reflection at the time. It was really just, I'm going to ignore this this feeling that's hanging over me, and I'm just going to bury myself in the work.
But does it come back around? I mean, at one point, once the work and the MBA is, you're like, okay, but now what? Can you escape? For how long can you escape it? That's what I'm.
In my experience, 5 years is about how long you can escape it.
And then what happens after 5 years?
I like I said, I was really unhealthy. And one, I was exhausted. I ended up, business kind of did well enough for me to sell to my distributor, and I kind of managed to make my, at least exit well enough with it, finish the MBA. And I was basically by that point. So the thing with training is you've got a cap from 6 a.m. to noon, probably, that you've got your peak hours, and then you spend the rest of the time recovering. When you've got to apply that work ethic and you don't have a beginning and an end, you can just keep going. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, like, I never drank, I never partied, I was just a dedicated workaholic with sport. When I went to competitions, I drank my pants off and acted like an idiot after the competition, right? Come home, not a single beer. I was like the no one beer guy but when number one, in those 3 to 5 years, I mean, I can have a few beers and I can, escape my sorrows and work hard. Mm-hmm. I just started drinking, man. I was drinking far more than I should have been. I was eating terribly. I was not taking care of myself. And at some point, around sort of 2014, 2015, it all just came to a head where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I got to quit drinking. I've got to get sober. I've got to get healthy. I've got to start taking some time to really look at what I'm running from and get really honest with myself, and take some time to figure out who I am. And for me, that kind of happened around that time. Quitting drinking and getting sober for me was a big thing. And I've been sober now for almost 7 years. But it was congrats for not being a complete fuck up. Good. But so for me, that was a big part of it. It was just pure self-destruction for those few years. And man, I don't envy athletes that are going through it right now. In fact, if you are, don't go through it alone. Reach out to me, reach out to any other former athlete, anybody else who's struggled and has kind of made it over the valley of death.
Did you have someone to talk to back then?
I had a good community around me of guys who were sober, who'd kind of been through their own versions of whatever I was going through. Yeah. And I kind of learned that I'm not that unique. I'm not that special snowflake that I thought I was. Yeah. And so that was really, that sort of reckoning by like 2015 was really sort of a thing that needed to happen, and fortunately, thank God it did. So not that you would change anything. I think that's what led you to be who you are now. But like, is there a way to go about retirement that you don't have to go as far deep? Is there? So I think actually Canada's actually taken some steps to put support in place for athletes in a way that wasn't there yet when I was retiring. So one of the things they have is Game Plan, which is basically I think it's at least at the time it was modeled after, when they first launched, was modeled after Australia, which there's data that there's evidence to suggest that when athletes focus on their career and they focus on education and other things outside their sport actually improves. The performance in sport improves, not the other way around, as would sort of intuitively you'd think. And so I think there are now support processes and organizations in place to ensure that athletes are getting career guidance leading up to their retirement. Now, sometimes athletes are forced to retire for injury or whatever, and their plans go out the window, right? But there are things, I know Queen's University now offers an MBA and also has other services that they allow athletes to get, things like deferred enrollment and things like that, which is like, what an amazing idea, not only for the athletes, but for the university. You're getting elite athletes who understand discipline, hard work, to come in and suddenly get career and guidance. Like, imagine the influence that has on the other students around them, right? Yeah. So the fact that the government spends so much money on helping fund elite athletes while they're training, I think that's kind of a way that they can actually get some of that value back on the back end of these careers, is career and education planning. So that's a big one. I think if you're still training, career and education planning. And if you're recently retired and going through that process, hopefully you've got some of those things in place. And if you don't, surround yourself with people who do. Find people who find your tribe. The people who have been there, who are going through their own career paths, who are going through their own transition, get together with them often. Yeah. Again, it sounds corny, but don't hide from your emotions. Lean into them. Whatever you do, don't use drugs or alcohol to run away from that sinking feeling in your chest.
I guess therapy is an option too.
For sure.
Like going, like just facing your own.
100%. And a lot of that too, those services are available to transitioning athletes now too. So I think the country's come a long way since I retired, which is great. But look, frankly, if you're out there struggling, you can probably get a hold of me somewhere, and I can maybe help point you in the direction of some of the services that I work with. So,
because that's great, because that's a theme that, in your case, it was Olympian, but like hockey players have come on this podcast, and they're like, no, let's not try to dodge the word depression. I went through a depression. It was bad. I was not healthy. I was not well. No one was talking about it at the time. Mental health is a really recent thing we've been talking about. Like,
for sure. You don't talk about it as an athlete.
Exactly.
No, push your feelings down. Get out there and win.
Exactly.
Right? So yeah, like letting those emotions bubble to the surface. And what's funny too is like when you think of I talk about escapism post-retirement, but if I'm being honest, like when I look at the training that I did and the pain that I pushed through and not care, I don't care if I break a bone, cut the damn thing off. I can still skate, right? Yeah. There's something around escapism in there too, and
right.
Oftentimes with tough athletes, those motivations are coming from dark places that were there before they ever started training, right? So maybe the outlet for it while I was training was going into training, right?
Yeah.
And it just did that thing. Never had an outlet when I was post-retirement. So I don't know. That's maybe a pet theory. I don't know if that's been validated out there, but it's got to be true.
Yeah, and then 2015, you stop drinking. You get your shit together. Like, where are you at this point? Like, has SportLogik started yet? Sport?
Oh yeah,
there's no S. It's SportLogik.
SportLogik. Yeah,
no, I thought it was SportLogik.
All good.
It's SportLogik.
No, almost everybody does that. By the way, don't. In hindsight, I probably should have taken more time to think of the name.
So had you started?
Yeah. So I was, hard work was intertwined with all of that. And when we started SportLogik, it was like 2014 when I first. So I had graduated from school. I had done an independent study in school, which was basically what's my next Olympics, right? What's my next big thing? And at that time, I kind of, in a way, stumbled across this new technology that was coming out. Part of me kind of exploring what I wanted to do next, I was wandering through the halls of the Center for Intelligent Machines and popping my head into the robotics labs. And, hey, what are you guys working on? And not enough MBAs do that, by the way. They all should. It's amazing. It was the best part of my school was just like exploring. And I ended up sitting in the back of the room and watching a PhD defend his PhD thesis. His name was Mersenne Javan, and he had this security surveillance technology that took videos and found anomalies. So it was basically what he was presenting as part of his PhD defense was imagine an airport video where the normal thing to do is walk up and down a hallway. If somebody does something anomalous, like drop a bag or jump up and down, it doesn't know what happened, but it knows something different happened. Mm-hmm. And it would just create this little highlight on the video. So if you were a security guard sitting watching 10 screens, you'd just see these little highlights. Oh, something different happened. I'll take a look at that. I'll take a look at that. So that was the thesis for the original technology. I kind of just got to talking with him after about all the things that I wanted to do. And at the time, the sport data industry was basically, there were two big companies. They each employed probably about 8,000 people who sit there and manually tag videos, manually tag every shot, every goal. If they can't tag it on a video, they'll sit there in the stadium and have like an app or something in front of them and just type in the information or tap on an iPad and manually enter all the data. So if you've ever seen sports stats, if you've ever seen a sports stat anywhere, the entire sports betting industry, it's all based on this manual data collection.
It's crazy when you think about it.
So it actually hasn't changed much. It's actually true, and so there's a couple things that have shifted, and I think we've helped bring about that shift. One is that we realized fairly early on what people do better than machines, and what machines do better than people.
Oh, what is this?
So
that's interesting.
So what people do better than machines is identify with a high degree of accuracy very specific events. Let's say a stick check, right? It's actually it's a complex thing you're looking at.
Yeah.
If you're trying to define a stick check, you could bring in 20 people. 20 people would define it different ways. We also sit and watch a 2D screen, so a broadcast video, right? Because you're a human, you know that that's a 3D space, and you know where that stick is, and you know where the puck is, and you sort of understand, oh yeah, the stick touched the stick, and it's sort of, this person had possession, but what does that really mean? So a high degree of accuracy at identifying very specific events labeled at at a specific time. On that frame, there was a stick check. What machines do better than people is identify patterns. And so let's use player tracking as an example. So saying that number 32 is there 30 frames in a row, number 21 is there 30 frames in a row, and here's the pattern of players as they skate across the ice. Right? So a human could not identify patterns of players every single frame, all throughout every second of every single game, right? And so to come up with and identify a pattern of players would be almost an impossible manual task. But when you combine those two things, so number one is it's augmenting what people can't do, and then it's automating some of what people do. Right. So we can identify automatically every shot, as an example. Yeah. But we're not going to be as accurate as humans. So you could create an automated product for, say, youth. I mean, if 50 shots were taken in that game, is that a big difference between, say, 45 shots? Not really. Scale that across 300,000 games, and suddenly, holy crap, you got a pretty good scouting product, right? But if you're looking at one specific game as an NHL team, no. You have to be next to 100% accurate on every single shot on who took it. So you need that sort of manual work integrated with the automated technology for NHL. You may not need it for CHL or for European hockey or for youth hockey, right? So we got really good at figuring out how to deploy the technology, how to integrate it with manual work. And I don't know even what tangent I'm on right now, but
but it was interesting. I was listening. It made me think, because you were talking about different leagues, like how different is for instance, because you're across many leagues across Europe, I suppose, and like in junior,
we do almost everything now. Yeah. So
are they asking for different things from you? For instance, in the Finnish league, whereas in the NHL, whereas junior hockey, what are the differences between what they're asking from you?
So for just to frame it, we have products in hockey, football, and soccer that now we've expanded. Successful products, scaling, and all sort of different in their own way. But for the purpose of this podcast, this conversation, I'll sort of narrow it to hockey. We started in the NHL. The data had to be perfect. The data had to be accurate. It had to be comprehensive, and we knew the teams would be willing to pay for it. And so when you start that, it's like, okay, we can layer in some manual data cleaning. We can layer in, certain things that the tech can't do yet. We can layer in and create a process on the back end that has some integration of technology and manual labor.
So the whole manual labor, is it coming from people working for you, or it's like the manual side of it, or is it like?
It's probably a long answer at this point.
Okay.
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is, I think we, on the back end, and I can't get into kind of the details of the guts of the machine, but one of the things that I'm actually most proud of what we've built is the integration of the technology and all of the sort of data cleaning stuff. Right. I think we built a process just through sheer necessity that the industry has never seen. And we are able now, so our NHL data is the most comprehensive data that has ever existed, and is delivered within sort of 3 to 5 minutes at the end of every period. And so to be able to do all of that live has been a process to build that back end. We also deliver the Swedish Hockey League, same data set, so the same comprehensive data set. We take that data, we build out the suite of tools for both all the teams and the league. We also have media products that we build on top of that, where we're delivering stories and insights and graphics and data charts and things like that live in game for both of those leagues. So it's a difficult operation. We've managed to do it better than anybody has ever done it. we then looked at, okay, how do we scale this thing? If you're looking at scouting applications, right, going into the CHL as an example, you can't have that layer of accuracy and turnaround time. The cost to do it is off the charts.
Yeah.
So we came out with a Scout IQ product, which is essentially a fully automated product. Doesn't have quite as much accuracy on the core data. So you kind of had to rebuild the product around that. So think of it as, I don't know, here's one example, actually. Here's a perfect example. So we have automated passes, automated shots, automated goals, automated breakaways in these things. But one of the things that we'll do is just having the players on ice. Imagine you're a scout and you're looking for to very quickly filter through videos and watch players. If you've got global coverage of these videos, and you know when a player is on the ice or off the ice, if you have their tracking information, sort of by definition, a simple derivative of that is you know when the player's on or off the ice. So you can filter down the videos and allow them to say, just watch when these players are on with these other players. Yep. Just watch when they're against these other players. Just watch when these teams are against each other. So suddenly, this ability to very quickly filter through global data sets becomes really easy. So we sort of redefined our products based on the optimal output of the technology. And so that's how we approached that scouting level elite hockey. Yeah. We also have a youth hockey product where we actually plug into local municipal arenas, cheap cameras. They're plugged in through our video streaming partners. We do the same thing. So we can determine who's on the ice at any given time based on the number on the jersey. And think about it, who's buying that product, right? Ultimately, for me, with my son in hockey, you tell me how much you want me to pay, and I'll get a highlight video from you. Yep. So we just started creating really cool highlight videos automatically. So rather than sit and have to watch a 60-minute clip of the whole game, my kid's on the ice maybe 15, 20 minutes. I get a 15, 20-minute highlight clip of just my kid's game. And we also added features that make the video production totally catered to my son. So it doesn't matter whose parents you are. If your kid's on the ice, you just enter the name of the player, and suddenly you have this production quality where the camera's following and zooming in and zooming out of your kid. And also, I don't know if you've ever played NHL on
esports.
So you know the little chevron over top of the head. Yeah. We put that over the player so you can see it, right? So you're not going, "Where's my kid?" So you have this we focus more on sort of the viewing experiences for the parents. Same underlying technology, but you got to really rethink the product when you're going to market, and you've also got to really put yourself in the shoes of whoever's going to be buying this product. It has nothing to do with the tech. It has nothing to do with the data. It really is how do we make the experience of that specific user, mind-blowingly good.
So, do you actually have a kid playing hockey?
He's young. He's 7.
Okay,
cool. But he does play. It's amazing, man.
Oh, it's so funny.
Seeing him all decked out in his gear before every practice, I love it.
Did you try to get him into figure skating, and then he was like, "Yeah, no," or you were like, "I don't want him."
Oh no, we do jumps in the living room.
Oh, there you go.
Look, I'm a bit on the fence on which direction he's going to go, and I almost 7. To an extent, I kind of to an extent don't care as long as he kind of falls in love with a sport of some sort. Yeah. I think you learn so much from sport at that age. Like you learn how to win, you learn how to lose, you learn how to be a good teammate. And so you're going to get that no matter what sport you're in. And like I said, I didn't start till I was 10. So if he wants to pick it up, great. I'd hate for him to feel pressure when he gets on the ice. Yeah. but I don't know. Whatever he's going to want to do, I'll help lean into it with him.
When you started with SportLogik with the NHL teams, I'm guessing they kind of gave you some feedback that would help you shape the app and what they wanted. How have they impacted the SportLogik, service in a way? Like, what did they want that you went, oh, we didn't even think about that, for instance, or whatever. If
you're doing product development right, your customers are going to tell you what they need, or they're going to show you without trying to show you. You know, if you can figure out how they're using it, how they're interacting with your products, and get yourself into their shoes, you're going to find the thing that you need to build. So everything we built is really catered to our users. So I would not have designed our products the way we did on my own in a silo.
I guess my question is, what did they need that you didn't know they would need?
I think video playback. As easy as as basic as that sounds, one of the things that really took off when we finally kind of put our finger on it was, let's imagine at the end of a game or the end of a season or whatever it is, you get a report, and that report has, here's your expected goals, here's where these players or lines are performing against who and when, and you've got some flag to go, well, that's weird. Why is that number what it is, right? It's something that's popping out. Being able just to click on that and have that, all the video clips that delivered that number curated and sent, I mean, really made a difference. I could probably go on 3 or 4 other tangents, but I think, that's one example of things that we just weren't thinking of, but didn't realize how valuable it was to our customers until we started working with them.
What's the next step for SportLogik at this point? I mean, you guys are everywhere. What's the next thing?
So the big one, and I touched on youth. I am so excited about this product. I put myself back into that little 16-year-old shoes when I was in Kelowna. Where I talked about, I only ever saw the Ontario or the Quebec athletes once a year at nationals. Nobody ever saw me either, which is why I had to jump on that plane and move to Montreal. I think our stuff is at the youth level is going to start highlighting kids that are doing amazing things that aren't getting discovered. So we now, like, if you, as an example, if you have a Live Barn video camera in your, if you have a video camera in the arena where you're training or playing, we have a partnership with Live Barn where you can actually get your SportLogik highlight feed directly through the app. So if you're a subscriber, you log in, and now you can actually get your games processed. That's so awesome. You get these highlight reels that are going to make the viewing experience for parents better. But as that scales, if you sort of follow the logic of where that's going to go, right? A lot of the teams that are scouting these players are our clients. So there's a natural evolution that you can think we'll be able to, assuming players opt in for some scouting application at some point, they're going to say, look, I want to create a highlight reel and I want to put myself, on a list to be viewed by scouts, right? And I'm kind of dreaming here. This product doesn't exist, but this is where the logical conclusion of where this goes is that the ability for every scout to say, look, I want a power defenseman. I'm looking for these types of skills that are well suited to the style of play that I'm looking for. And for us to be able to curate a video down to X number of kids so that the scouts can then sort of explore. I see that as being kind of a natural step from where we are today.
I gotta say I agree, because like the scouting is just getting younger and younger, and we want to have access to these data in a very easy and approach. So,
and look, this is where it goes. But I can tell you right now, at least for the next year, maybe 2, the one thing that we are obsessed with is making that parent viewing experience, revolutionizing it. The same way that we revolutionized data in the NHL, we are going to completely revolutionize the way that parents watch those videos. So getting highlight clips, maybe at some point.
That would be
awesome. You're getting these magical moments, right? You're getting a notification when your kid's on the ice when somebody scores, and suddenly you've got the video at your fingertips, right? Like, these are the types of things where the ability to see and experience your child on the ice is going to be completely flipped on its head, and I'm so excited about where that's going right now. So
I'm excited, and I'm not even a parent. that goes to show how much. I mean, because you're telling me this, I was just playing beer hockey, before coming over, and my beer league, and like you were talking, I was like, I mean, could you imagine at one point like every single arena having some of your cameras and and I could watch
look, we don't have video here, but I could show you a demo. I don't know if you have a place where you could share.
Yeah, sure. We could add it to the YouTube. Or,
I'll have to get a demo from the team, but I'll pull up just so you can see it here. Maybe I can tell you what's happening in this video.
Live.
Hang on.
While you're doing this, because it makes me think. I was doing this once a year. There's a charity game in Laval with this comedian, and he invites hockey players, pro hockey players and comedians, and we do this game. And last year the game was on TV, and we could like have access to our highlights. Okay, so you're showing me now. So this is from like
that's
we're talking like local arena here.
Yeah. That's just a local arena that is a fully automated product. And what you're seeing right now is
awesome.
You see the little chevron over the player's head.
Yep.
Now what you're going to see in the top left corner is the shift number as well.
So we got the kid's name, his number, shift number, the time of the shift. This is like...
And the video automatically cuts out when he gets off the ice and cuts back in when he gets back on.
All I'm thinking is that kid could be me. You know?
Well, that's why I asked. Was there a live-born camera in the rink that you were in? Because 100%.
Yeah.
So this is what you're going to love this for your beer league.
God.
And this is again when you start dreaming about where this thing goes. This is where here are some stats from the game as well.
There you go. So now we have
there's a heat map of where the player spent the time, and that was probably a left winger spending a lot of time in front of the net. You see the time on ice. You see the time on ice per zone. You can zoom in on that if you like.
So so like OZ, like offensive zone time, neutral zone time, defensive zone time, offensive impact rating.
So the impact rating is something, this was a demo. We were just playing around with it. We were trying to see if there was some automated information that came out to determine how much impact this player had on the game. We're not launching that this year, but it's an underlying data set that we're going to figure out what to do with it at some point. But ultimately it's like imagine again, if you're a parent, you're watching the stream on this video and maybe even a commercial comes up where it's like, brought to you by Sporting Good, right? And there's a little segment on how the player's playing. How are your kids doing, right? Maybe a little note on, their speed is a little faster than it was last game. So there's so many things that can be built on top of this that I just think like I said, the way that parents experience their games of their kids is about to be flipped on its head, and I'm so excited about it.
You make me want to have kids sooner than I expected. That's awesome. Actually, like
so, I'll see if I can get a couple demos. I don't know if you want to share them with any of your listeners, but
the YouTube video part of it. But that's like, I mean, everyone playing in their local arena want to have that tape of.
Imagine beer league. Imagine you're doing comparisons on anything, right?
Yeah,
whatever it is.
that game I played in Laval was actually broadcasted on TVA Sport 2 on the second show. I was like, oh, cool. There's going to be a game, and we got the tape, and I had this assist that I really wanted to look back on because I was like, I think I did a nice play, and then I have this clip of me in my phone, and I'm like, holding on to that for dear life. It's like I have my own little highlight reel for one play. So imagine if you could have that for all of your games and like actually like look back on your play and improve and stuff. Like it could be.
So that technology exists today, is well beyond R&D. We have it. It's being deployed currently. Meaning awesome. that exact product that you're describing will be in your fingertips very soon.
Oh, I cannot wait. Like I would love to look back at the game at my shift from the game I played this morning, and go
you get it right after the game. Yeah. As soon as you get off, it'll automatically, you just need to log in, enter your jersey number.
That would be a Christmas gift for like.
Well, Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like what's your timeline on this for this to be like, I guess like accessible to like the mainstream?
I mean, as soon as the season starts, so we deployed it last year at a bunch of tournaments. Right. Our MVP, which is our minimum viable product. We got out in front of a few tournaments, did some interviews, spoke to some parents, brought in, got some focus groups together. So this is available this season now. As soon as people are out playing in those arenas.
At this very time, it's September 7th, 2023. So the current season,
next couple weeks.
Okay, cool. I guess like this could be in like do you think it could be in all arenas at one point? Like I mean like every single local eventually.
That's the goal. And like I said, we have now products in hockey, football, and soccer. I mean, sky's the limit when you start looking at all sports, right? You start looking at basketball, volleyball, lacrosse, all of and the fact that there's 560 million athletes around the world registered in organized leagues.
Yeah.
That's, almost 1 billion parents. Yeah. So I think I think the idea of using this technology to just totally revolutionize the viewing experience for parents, and eventually totally revolutionize the scouting process as well. So there, like I said, there's going to be some kid in Vermeer, BC, right? Somewhere who's got some defensive capability that isn't showing up on some stat somewhere that suddenly will. And for me, that's the thing that I get excited about. So the scouting applications aren't there yet, but very soon.
There.
Yep.
Is there anything SportLogik could do for figure skating? Have you
So I can't get into the details yet, but what I can tell you is that there is a project with the International Skating Union.
Cool.
It's specifically designed to take some of the subjectivity out of some of the technical components of the sport. So it's early. And it's going to be a slow burn to get this thing up. It's a organization that's going to require years of testing, proving. But I'm hoping there's going to be something soon. Because
I feel it's pretty cool for you to come full circle and come back where it all began. The last question before I let you go, because we've already done we've talked about so much, but recently the Montreal Canadiens have hired Phil Desaulniers and the new analytics guy, and also Chris Boucher, that I think both guys, and I just want you to tell us about those two guys and what they bring. And
so Chris and Phil were actually our first two hires when we started the company. So it was Mersan, the PhD, myself. We founded the company. We brought in Mark Cuban as an investor, kind of around the time that Chris and Phil joined. And look, I got two stories. I'll start with Chris.
Please do.
I mentioned that Mersan and I knew nothing about hockey. Nothing. Like literally, we were like, I don't know, it's on skates. Mm-hmm. And so we were looking at the technology, and we're just like, okay, we need somebody to give us a framework for how to think about hockey. I went on Twitter and started started finding, looking for stats, looking for people who were doing hockey stats. And the general 99.9% of the people were taking traditional NHL data, coming up with new metrics and insights, and basically repurposing data that existed and finding insights from it. But there was this one guy. He had maybe 1,000 followers. And he had a Twitter feed that was dry. It was like, this guy had X number of loose puck recoveries tonight. This person had this many turnovers. And he had stats that nobody was collecting, right? He never mentioned puck battles. It was all loose puck recoveries. And then he had definitions of these loose puck recoveries. And I was like, where is this guy getting his data? Like, it's the raw data that I'm interested in, right? The foundation. After that, we can build all kinds of insights, but the foundational data is different. So I followed him for a couple weeks or so, and I finally just reached out to him. I was like, hey, I'm Craig. We're starting this thing. Mark Cuban's coming in. And turned out he was working for Purelator, and he lived maybe 20 minutes away from the office that we were set up. So he came in, and he came in. Basically, what I learned at that time was that Chris had spent the better part of 15, 20 plus years basically in his basement watching games in slow motion, manually tagging events. So he started off first by tagging shots. Then he started tagging passes leading up to the shot. Then he realized, okay, I've got to pass, and he eventually, over the course of a decade plus, had a rigorous, well-defined set of hockey events, and micro events, as he called them. And so this guy had basically built this database. He put it all in Excel, and he had become so good at this that he could do it a game in like 2 hours. And now it didn't have any timestamps because he was just throwing things into Excel. And then he was pulling insights out of that, and he was doing some scouting, and he was trying to kind of scout more, and he was calling teams. But he's a real data guy. This guy he could look at a spreadsheet and he can give you all the insights. There's no colors, no charts. He just looks at a grid of numbers and he gets it. So, he came in, and we basically said, all right, well, could you train 30 people to do exactly what you're doing so we can go get a couple seasons worth of data, give that data to the AI guys to begin training models, and begin creating our patents and our automated data collection, while at the same time we've at least got a base set of data so we can start thinking about what our products are. So Chris came in, quit his job, joined, and this was, for me, on a personal note, this was the most terrifying moment of my life up to that point, because here's a guy who's got a family who's leaving a job with a 401k to suddenly join this crazy dream, and we just got our financing. So, and this is in like 2014 at the peak of my insanity. Mm-hmm.
That's what we call the perfect storm.
Oh, pretty much.
Black Swan.
Yeah. And so it was a crazy time. Phil joined, I think like a month or two later. He was an experienced software developer, and basically it was like, okay, we got the software guy, we got the AI guy, we got the hockey guy, so let's get this thing moving. And so it was basically me and Chris pounding on all the NHL teams' doors. I was making the original Excel, visuals, making Chris's stuff accessible.
Marketing at this point.
Kind of, yeah. So, and then it was the team's job to build the patents and build automation around it and all of that. And we were kind of running like an AI shop and a hockey company, kind of almost in parallel to an extent. And so, we got out there, we started selling. Our first sale was a team sent us a hard drive of video. We processed it. They sent us a bill for the hard drive. We had to pay them $100. And it cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to collect that data. We gave it to them and paid them $100 to give them the data. We could not get anybody to buy this, but it was like, trust me, once this stuff is accessible, it's going to change the way you. I think the next team, we asked them for their pizza budgets, like whatever you were going to spend on pizza, give that to us. Just so whatever number you don't need approval for, give that to us. So Chris and I really did the legwork at getting in, and Chris was the guy that talked to the teams, just spoke with them, and here's what this means. I get it, it's just a piece of data, but this is ultimately, and so sort of that rapport and that discussion was what ultimately sort of helped soften the product for the customers.
What were they saying at first when you approached them? Were they like,
no, thank you?
No, like that
at best, get out of my office. At worst,
seriously.
Oh yeah,
they were not at least a bit curious about like, this could be a tool.
The first time I met Brian Burke was at the Sports Analytics Conference in Boston, and I had my cell phone, I had a demo, I had the whole thing all ready. I managed to get 30 seconds of his time, and he looked at it and goes, interesting, and then he walked away. And that was more time than anybody had given me up until that point. So,
and that guy is a Harvard grad.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting story, but I actually think his approach to sort of leaning on some of the numbers and also having, strong hockey sense and following your gut is the right way to use this stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
he's also known as being an old time hockey guy. He actually been on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
you got 30 seconds. I got 30 minutes. So that's the best we could get with Brian. Like,
there you go.
He was actually pretty good. He knows how to give a good show and be relevant. So yeah, he was a great guest on the show. But that's funny that you went to like old school we
went everywhere. I mean, that was one. We went everyone. So eventually we got in, but we built that. Chris was with us then until we got probably maybe 2/3 or more of the league. He then got an offer to follow his dream, which was to work for an NHL team. And it was the same. Like I got goosebumps the day that he got that offer. It was like, yes, that's your North Star, right? That's your dream. Go run. So he had
helped us. Working Pure later, years earlier.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And he grew up here in Montreal. So when he had the chance, when the offer came to Montreal again, it's like a goosebumps moment. It was like everything in that moment was right. So
yeah. What was the break? Sorry, I just want to know, because you said you couldn't get anyone to be to pay attention. What was the break?
It was an exercise in knocking our heads against the wall, hard, fast, consistently for a long time. There was no break. We managed to sign on one team for, like I said, we paid them. The next team paid us a couple $1,000. My first board meeting, I had to sit there with our board members who had just put in a lot of money and say, I know we just spent, more than half our budget collecting this data, and I know we just made our first $100 sale. But trust me, this thing's going to be big. So no, it was just consistent hard work, and we got in one team at a time. By the time we had 3 teams, we had enough sort of feedback with these teams where they were, number one, we saw them actually make really good decisions and find hidden gems. And those teams that went on, the first teams we worked with won the Stanley Cup that year, and it was clear that these guys had the right people and had an advantage. When we got to about 7 or 8 teams, that's when I think the fear was sort of instilled in the rest of the league, where everybody was kind of like, wait a sec, these teams might have an advantage on us, so now we kind of have to have it. But I don't think there was like a click. There was no sort of moment where I was like, oh, now it all just works. Like we scrapped for every inch.
After how many teams can you actually charge a decent amount when you sell the product? You know, like at one point
we had to sort of start to standardize pricing when we got to about 5 teams. And that was like, you know, you can't have this like off the, you know, these sort of weird deals here and there once you get beyond that, because it's just not fair, and you've got a responsibility to all your clients.
For sure.
So, you know, it was around 5 teams or so we started creating standardized packages.
Because the NHL is known as a copycat league, and that is yet just another example of like, you know, I don't know. And then one team does it, then a second one, and then everyone's like, that's the new trend, you know, which is kind of funny because that's just yet some other example. Were you a big fan of Moneyball? Did you like?
So I loved the movie. I read the book, and I actually found the one thing in that exercise was what came out of the book that I found really interesting was Billy Beane talking about you know, the ugly players. He really talked about his gut a lot in that book. He didn't use, I mean, data. He found a metric that they definitely sort of doubled down on as a strategy, but he did a lot of talking about that sort of subjective gut feel you've got with your players. And that I don't think came out in the movie as much. And it's like, you know, using the insights from the data to sort of form your hypothesis and sticking to it within a range.
Right.
But never forgetting that sports sense is like, our brains are very powerful things, and that sports sense has got to be there.
Yeah, that's interesting you're mentioning, because one could think like, oh, he's the guy from SportLogik. He's going to tell you, look at the numbers, and like.
I would have thought the same with Billy Beane. Yeah, but he didn't, right?
He still had, and he was like a former player too. He had all this information in his brain you know, that he just added to the numbers. But
Chris was a goalie. Chris Boucher.
Oh, was he?
And so you got to think of, you know, goalie. I mean, they're all a little nuts, right? They're the drummer in the band. And you know, he probably spent his time as a goalie and sitting, you know, in the back watching the plays, counting, assessing, right? And so that analytical mindset started sometime around that.
That makes sense for him to be a goalie, because like goalies is like it's an individual sport in a collective sport. Like, because you're the goalie in a sports team, but you're actually doing your own thing. And I just saw this video of the Habs interviewing like a goalie they ended up drafting this year, and they're just like doing interviews with prospects, and they're like, okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to name players from the league you played in, and you're going to tell me if he's a lefty or righty, and is he a passer or a shoot first? And the goalie was just like, lefty, shooter, lefty, passer. This guy,
I love it.
And you could see just the data, and they're like, oh, and he's not actually thinking about collecting data. He just is, you know.
Yep.
That's how a goalie and that's what Wayne Gretzky used to do. Like when you were talking about, you know, like the
pattern recognition,
and like the zone, like with the colors. How do you call it? Like the warm.
The heat map.
Thank you, heat map. Wayne Gretzky as a 6-year-old. That's one of my favorite like Wayne Gretzky story. He would have a drawing of a rink, and then he would watch the game on TV, and never looking down at the drawing, he would look at the game, and with a pen or a pencil, he would just go and mimic on the drawing where the puck was.
Wow.
That's what he was doing. Like, we're talking,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like the 60s or 70s. He was doing that as a kid. Just, he was already like a student of the game, you know? And people like, why did he have like...
So this, I mean, look, in that case, I stand corrected. I said earlier that human beings couldn't manually collect that data. Apparently he did.
he clearly did. And then he would go, afterwards, he would go, okay, so he would study his kind of drawing, go, oh, so that's where the puck always is.
There's a collection of ink in this section of the...
So that's where the puck is. That's where the puck should be. So that's where he always knew. That's why he always knew, like, that's where the... I don't want to... What was his famous saying that Steve Jobs took? Like,
I don't want to know where the puck is going.
Yeah, I don't want to know where the puck is. I want to know where the puck will be.
Yeah.
That's where, like, why is Wayne Gretzky sending the puck to no one? Oh, wait a second. There's a guy coming at the very second. So that's what he was... I had on the podcast a guy who coached him for Team Canada, Jean Perron, who used to coach the Habs. And he said, this guy is a hockey computer. That's how he called it, a hockey computer. His brain is because he's got... And all this data you're collecting is like, oh, he was kind of in advance, I guess, in his own brain. But we're talking like same purpose.
That's amazing. Well, it's a digital version of that, right? So we'll imagine having 11 pens. You've got your players and your puck, and that's essentially what we're doing, right?
That's amazing.
But yeah, wow.
When did your board finally went like, oh, okay, this is cool?
Oh God, I don't know how much time you have. Look, we're fortunate that technology and sport are cool areas. So there's interest early on from investors, right?
Yeah.
But we went through some real tough times, some scary moments in those early days where, we knew we were going after something, but every bit of evidence that we had in front of us was telling us we weren't. We were burning way too much cash.
Yeah.
We were going in a total addressable market that was very small. We were, not getting any revenue from those early customers, but it's just like, we knew it's like, this is the right thing. Trust me. It's got to play out. Yeah. And I think it took us to expand beyond hockey, and it took us to expand into down market leagues before the fear and discomfort in the boardroom started to dissipate.
That's good. We digress, but Phil and Chris, boarding on the Habs. What do they bring to the table? Just like what are they? Because we talked about Chris, but their jobs.
So Phil and Chris are just a great combo. And I have to say this is when they moved over. The tough thing for me is putting on my professional hat, and like we almost in a sense kind of cut the professional relationship, because it's like, look at us, we have an obligation to 31 teams, right? So it's like we're giving everybody the tools equally, and we kind of had to like pull away. So I actually don't know what they're doing right now. Cool. But what I do know is that on the sort of softer side of that, the way these two work together, they're a great combo. Chris has these ideas in his mind, and oftentimes they're formed in a way that makes sense to maybe a hockey coach. But when you break down that sort of grid of data, it might not fit the sort of discussion he needs to have with a coach or a scout or somebody.
Right.
And Phil bridges that gap. He sort of is able to take the data, pull the ideas out of Chris's mind, and put them into software. And so, they were an amazing team together, and I have no doubt that that's the nature of their relationship right now in the Habs. And so
1-2 punch.
They're really, and there's a couple of our former guys out there that are in a few different teams now as well, cool. And it's amazing to see. You know, much like watching Chris's career path, seeing all these guys come through, learn, get to work with teams, and then move on to work with teams has been awesome. One of the greatest joys of this awesome. Company.
Look, Craig, we've done over 2 hours. I didn't know we were. I'm gonna have to let you go here. You have a family and obligations, but I guess
that was fun.
That was pretty fun. That was actually awesome. But what's your next Olympics? What's the next?
Well, like I said,
you said the
youth product on our side.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I hope the next time you will have read Tooting by then and give me some feedback. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for coming on DST. Merci à vous. J'espère que vous avez apprécié l'épisode. Je remercie Craig du fond du cœur d'être venu nous partager son histoire. Je vous rappelle, Drette Tape, c'est une équipe. Il y a Fred Levac qui fait le jingle, le montage. On a Amélia McGuire Saint-Onge qui s'occupe de, mon Dieu, programmation, réseaux sociaux, booking. Hugo Reich également au booking. Producer Tom qui mange des chips. Et David Beaucage à l'animation, recherche et... Mon Dieu, votre humble serviteur. Merci à Craig encore. Craig qui est super sympathique, gros fan d'humour que je vais inviter à mon spectacle éventuellement. Donc voilà, j'espère que vous passez de beaux moments, passez une magnifique semaine et surtout allô. OK, bye bye now, bye bye.